Order, please rise for Mayor Michael Fougere.
Please be seated. Welcome everyone to the April 10th meeting of Regina City Council, special meeting of council. There are a couple of housekeeping notes before we actually begin our discussions tonight. Councillor Bryce is joining us by teleconference, so she'll be interjecting by way of a speaker, so it's a bit different than usual, but she is participating in this. And there are a couple of changes or corrections to some of the reports on tonight's agenda. And I would draw members of council and those in the gallery to report 17-3. This is annual property tax exemption. There is a replacement of a table in there, and this information is available through the clerk's office to those who want to have that here, and certainly for members of council. It's CM 17-3, the 2017 annual property tax exemption list, Appendix B, page 4, to be precise. And the next is CM 17-5 is the amended general operating budget. Page 7, the table should be replaced with the corrected information. The service reduction number should be $1,692,300 instead of $874,500. And again, this information is available for members in the gallery, the media, and members of council, of course. So we have a special meeting of council to look strictly at issues related to the budget, and we have a full gallery, full engagement by the community, then that's good to see. If I could have a confirmation of the agenda, please. Councillor Bresciani, a seconder, please. Councillor Murray, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Before we get to our table delegations and related reports, I would ask Ms. Harlack to give us a background discussion about the 2017 reassessment tax policy. Ms. Harlack.
Through you, Your Worship. The tax policy report that's before you is the next steps in the 2017 reassessment process. Reassessment is required by provincial legislation to occur every 4 years, and the reassessment updates the base date or appraisal date from January 1st, 2011 to January 1st, 2015. Council does have 4 tax policy tools that can help mitigate significant tax shifts, such as mill rate factors. So Council can set mill rate factors that determine the share of the municipal taxes for groups of properties. Historically, we have had 3 mill rate factors: residential, commercial, and a subclass for golf courses. We have phase-in, where Council can adopt a phase-in to mitigate significant changes to taxes due to reassessment. Minimum tax, that's a minimum on each property, and a base tax, where Council could set a levy for a portion of taxes to be based on a flat fee per property, and the remainder would be allocated by assessment. Reassessment reallocates taxes but does not generate any additional revenue to the city. The city can only do that through the budget processes, through your mill rate increases. So our tax policy recommendations tonight are looking at providing stability in the tax policies. So we are recommending that the mill rate factors be set so that there is no shifting of taxes between the residential and non-residential groups, that a 3-year phase-in be applied to commercial properties that is revenue neutral, and phase-in increases and decreases by applying the change at 1/3 in 2017, 2/3 in 2018, and 100% of the changes in 2019. And we do not recommend a minimum tax or a base tax. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harlack. So we'll move on to delegations, and there is one, D 17-29, John Hopkins. Good evening, Mr. Hopkins. If you could identify yourself for the record, who you represent. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions afterwards.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of Regina City Council. My name is John Hopkins, and I am the Chief Executive Officer of the Regina District Chamber of Commerce. I'm here today to provide our perspective on the 2017 reassessment tax policy report before you. I want to begin my comments by thanking Mr. Barr for his years of service and to wish him nothing but the best in his retirement. Over the years, I've relied on his exceptional understanding of property assessment methodology, as well as his keen insight into property tax policy. I would like to begin by restating what is in the report, but is sometimes a source of a lot of confusion. Reassessment, in and by itself, does not increase the total amount of taxes paid. It redistributes the taxes within the class. I have had this discussion with many people who have been mistakenly of the view that this is a tax grab by the city, which it certainly is not. Moreover, the mill rate factors that are outlined in this report do not shift taxes from the non-residential sector to the residential sector or vice versa. They distribute the taxes based on a split of roughly 63% residential and 37% commercial on a revenue-neutral basis. Again, another source of misunderstanding. There are other ways to look how taxes are distributed, including looking at the ratio of non-residential over residential. When looking at this approach, in 2016, Regina's rate was 2.23. However, as the report before you states, there are significantly different assessment cycles and base years in provincial legislations. For example, Regina's 2016 ratio is calculated on an assessment base year of 2011, while Calgary's ratio was calculated on assessment base year of 2016. Incidentally, even during the first year of the reassessment cycle, we are still using data older than Calgary's, given the base date for this reassessment is January of 2015. This is a significant challenge we face with our 4-year reassessment cycles. Because a question was asked about non-residential over residential ratios during budget night, I thought I would also share with you that according to Jack Vick, a professor emeritus of accounting in the College of Commerce, University of Saskatchewan, as outlined in the tax framework for Saskatchewan's continuing prosperity, the ratio from an accounting perspective should be no higher than 1.43. And I quote, which would equalize the effective rate of tax as businesses can deduct property tax from their personal and corporate income tax liability. Still, another way of looking at property taxes is to look at the levy per $1,000 of assessment. When looking at this methodology, Calgary's non-residential taxes paid per $1,000 of assessed values in the Altus Group's 2016 report is $15.93 versus $22.30 for Regina, a 40% higher rate than Calgary. But again, this is not really comparing apples to apples, because Calgary uses a very different assessment cycle. When looking at property tax as a whole, according to the most recent City of Calgary property tax survey released using 2016 data, Regina has the second lowest property tax per capita out of 15 communities at $515, which is $139.56 lower than the average, or put another way, we're at 27% lower than the average. Since the infamous reassessment in 1997, which created enormous instability and upheaval in our community, we have worked with your administration on phase-ins. The phase-in that is being proposed is consistent to what we have done historically. The phase-in essentially calls upon those who are getting large decreases to forego a portion of the decrease to allow those who are facing large increases to be phased in at a slower rate. This property tax policy is revenue neutral to the City of Regina. In conclusion, we believe that we have a property tax policy approach that is reasonable and equitable, one that provides stability and predictability, and we encourage you to support the recommendations within the report as presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hopkins, for your presentation of the questions of the delegation. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks very much. Evening, Mr. Hopkins. I want to kind of center our questions on two parts. I'm going to refer first to a comment that you made, and I should be more accurate, but you talked about us having maybe the 4th lowest taxes. I think you're referring across Western Canada. Is that correct?
The City of Calgary report does have Regina 4th or 5th. I think in the brief I talked more about on a per capita basis where we're second lowest. But the City of Calgary reports were 4th or 5th, somewhere in there.
Yeah, you referred to that when we did the budget the first time. So
right.
I just want to go back to that. When you say that, or when the City of Calgary does their comparison, are they talking about municipal taxes, the whole bill, or just the municipal portion?
Well, they look at the whole piece. In fact, they look at the municipal as well as adding on the education portion and other levies like a library levy or whatever it might be. And they look at two-story buildings as well as looking at single-family. And the single-family one is the one where you look at that, and in isolation, the municipal portion of property tax by itself, fourth or fifth.
Good, thanks. Let's just seek a little clarity between you and I so that everybody understands this. When you get a property tax bill, there, in fact, are 3 different categories on that bill. Am I correct?
Right, sometimes more.
Sometimes more. But one refers to the municipal sector, which is pretty much what we have control over here. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And there is a library portion?
Correct.
And what is the third?
The education portion,
Thanks.
and there might be a fourth in the bid levy portion.
Thank you for
Right.
pointing that out. Good. Typically, we've given out one bill, though. Is that correct here in Regina or in Saskatchewan?
Well, typically, people will get a property tax notice from whatever municipality it would be, and it would come from, the envelope would literally say, in our case, City of Regina on the envelope. I don't think it says anything other than that.
Right.
And it's one bill, you open the bill, you look at it, and most people, I would venture to say, look at the bottom line and say, oh, I have to pay X $1,000 for property tax, and by the way, it came from the City of Regina. Now, this has been a historical problem that's faced the city for many, many years, and I think we've made some headway, but again, there's a lot of people get their bill, look at it, and say that the bill came from the City of Regina.
Correct. So we are an agent of the province as well as our own agent. Is that again accurate?
Yep. Yes.
Thanks very much. So are your education, assuming you're a resident or a property owner, business owner in Regina, are the education portion of your taxes going up?
Yeah, and they're not going up by a small amount. There has been a lot of talk about the shortfall that's facing the city, hence I think a lot of the crowd that we see here. But on the other side of the property tax bill, the education portion is going not insignificantly as well.
I think it's 10.5%. Now, do the folks that I sit around with here have any control over that?
Absolutely not.
Okay, thanks. So if I told you that the City of Regina collects the education portion of property taxes on behalf of the residents and for the province and charges a fee to do that, would that make sense to you? Like where we spend hours and paper and computers and folks? Would that make sense that we charge a fee?
Well, it would make a lot of sense, given the fact that most businesses are in the business of charging people for the work they do. So, of course, it would make some sense.
So are you aware that after this year, City of Regina will no longer be able to charge that fee to do that, which is approaching $2 million a year?
I've read that in the report, and I'm not sure if I'll get asked this question later or maybe during this discussion, but I do know that there is a lot of concern with the budget of the province of Saskatchewan. And when we surveyed our members, and those results I'll share the next time I get up, our members share some of those concerns. And to that end, we have reached out to the government of Saskatchewan and asked them to meet with us to talk about some of the concerns that are being expressed by our members. And I think we're pretty close to having a date nailed down, which is in the not-too-distant future. And we'll have those discussions about some of the impacts of the grant in lieu money that have impacted our city, as well as the impact of that fee on the education portion of property tax. So those will be a couple of things that we will certainly talk about.
Okay, I'll look forward to those thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Other speakers? Councillor Massanelli.
Through you. I just want to stop and say thank you very much for some clarity on the work of Dr. Jack Vick. Last time I asked that question, I was left hanging by another delegation. So thanks for filling in the blanks and bringing that to light.
You're most welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Massanelli. You can return to the gallery. We'll now consider the report before us. This is CR 17-24, 2017 Reassessment Tax Policy. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'd like to read the following recommendation of the Finance Committee to City Council. 1, that the following principles be adopted in establishing mill rate factors for 2017. A, that the relative share of property taxes between the residential and non-residential properties does not change due to reassessment. B, that long-term stability be considered in establishing tax policy for mill rate factors. 2, that mill rate factors be set for the group of residential classes of properties and the group of non-residential properties such that the above recommendations are applied. 3, that the subclasses for golf courses be continued and the mill rate factor set so that the effective tax rate is equal to 65% of the effective commercial rate. 4, that a phase-in of property tax changes be implemented. For the commercial and industrial class of properties, for changes in property taxes as a result of the 2017 reassessment, whereby the phase-in shall be revenue neutral by phasing in decreases and increases, with decreases and increases applied as follows: 2017 increase and decreases limited to 1/3 of the property tax change. 2018 increases and decreases be limited to 2/3 of the property tax change. 2019, the full increase or decrease would be applied. And finally, that the city solicitor be instructed to prepare the necessary bylaws. Your worship, if I can get a second for that, I'll speak briefly.
Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you very much. We had a very fine explanation of what's going on here in a complicated area from Ms. Harlock and amplified by Mr. Hopkins. I just want to drive home 3 points. First of all, and if there's one thing the media takes away from tonight, I want them to take this away: reassessment does not generate extra revenue for the city. Reassessment is revenue neutral. Some properties will go up in the reassessment values, some will go down, depending on how the market value of your property changes within the class. But as far as the revenues collected by the city as a result of reassessment, there is no change. Secondly, as Ms. Harlock set out, there are 4 property tax tools that are available to the city to help make the process more fair. 3 of them, mill rate factors. The mill rate as between residential and commercial properties, minimum tax and base tax are not changing in any way in this recommendation. There's no change there, so that the thrust of this recommendation is stability, is the status quo, keeping the tax system stable. And thirdly and finally, there is, with respect to the 4th property tax tool policy, a phase-in. A phase-in, in this case, which affects commercial and industrial properties. What it says is that because the value of commercial industrial properties has risen very quickly, some have risen very quickly, those changes are going to be phased in over a 3-year period. But again, as far as the city is concerned, that phase-in is revenue neutral. That is, some properties, commercial properties that are going up quickly, their taxes will rise a little more slowly in the 3 years, and some whose taxes are decreasing will decrease a little more slowly, so that the owners of those properties, commercial and industrial properties, will have a fair chance to adjust to this change. But again, as far as the city is concerned and the revenues we collect, this measure is revenue neutral. So, Your Worship, this is a recommendation to adopt the tax policies that have been set out. It's a status quo recommendation. Even the phase-in which we're recommending here does not depart from the kind of phase-in that the city has done over the past 3 years. I'd ask for adoption, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Speakers to the report. Councillor Massanelli.
One of the points really resounds with me, and that's status quo. With the adoption of the province's last budget, I think the status quo has been smashed. And I think that although this might have to go through tonight, I think we really have to re-examine what status quo is and the effects of what's going on, because just to try to carry the line with the same tools we used in the past might be a little bit short-sighted. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Councillor Massanelli. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you very much. I have some questions for administration here regarding the ratio. I was wondering if perhaps you could explain to me the rationale for this ratio, with commercial to residential. There was a number given, I believe it was 65-35. What's important about that number?
Ms. Harlock.
Through Your Worship, I'll defer that to Mr. Barr.
Mr. Barr.
Through Your Worship, the ratio is simply the distribution of the taxes, and it's since the reassessments have started, we had approximately the same. What does happen, though, in between reassessment years is there's more residential growth than commercial, so there is an increase in the residential share by 1/10 or 0.2% each year, and that's due to the growth that's additional or higher growth than there is in the commercial sector.
Now, the report speaks to maintaining that balance, that ratio. Why? Why couldn't we see it move towards a 50-50 split or anything else?
Mr. Barr?
Through your worship, certainly council has the authority to change that split. It's something I think you would need to look at closely. For example, if we decided to just let this reassessment go through without mitigating it, there would have been a $10 million shift from residential to commercial this year, and that would be quite unmanageable. Last reassessment, there would have been a $12 million shift from commercial to residential. So it's something that provides some stability, but there are other ways of looking at that as well.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Your Worship, I have a question about the golf course policy in here. It says that the subclass for golf courses be continued and the mill rate factor set to that of the effective tax rate is equal to 65% of the effective commercial tax rate. What's the deal with this 65%? Why this number? What does that do?
Mr. Barr?
Through your worship, through the last two reassessments, the golf course has come forward and brought forward their case. Essentially, the land is in a floodplain and floods quite often. The golf season here is short, and the values are based on the land as if vacant, and so it created some issues for them, and council had provided direction to reduce the mill rate factor to 65% of the commercial, both the last two reassessments.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Are there any other speakers to this report? Before I call the question, I'd just like to reiterate what the delegation said, and I know all council and administration will share this with me in wishing Don Barr all the best in his retirement. He has been probably the one of the top assessors in Canada and has been with us, I believe, since 1999, handling some very difficult times. And the measure of he and his team's competence and work ethic shows that we don't have a lot of appeals. We don't have a lot of angst in the community about reassessment when it happens, and it is largely due to his leadership and his team's leadership of bringing this forward. So I'd like to give him a round of applause, say thank you for his work he's done. So there being no other speakers on Report 24, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. So we'll move to delegations, communications, and related reports, and this is primarily focused on the revisit of their 2017 budget. So I know Mr. Holden, the City Manager, has some comments. The floor is yours, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. Your Worship and members of City Council, on February 13th, you approved the City's 2017 budget, and that budget provided for a 3.99% mill rate increase. That increase allowed the City of Regina to maintain its current service levels, but it also required that the administration look to find $2.5 million in internal cost reductions. Just a little over 2 weeks ago, the province tabled its 2017-2018 budget. And that budget affected the city in two key areas. First of all, the budget ended the long-standing agreement between the city and SaskPower and Sask Energy that compensated the city for revenues as a result of the city not owning or operating its electrical and gas distribution systems. That revenue has been referred to as grants in lieu. The expansion of the provincial sales tax, and of particular relevance is the expansion to the inclusion of construction costs, which is a significant cost center for the City of Regina. So the total impact of those reductions is $10.3 million in 2017, and it will be $15.7 million when it's fully annualized in 2018. On March 27th, Council directed the administration to reopen the city's budget and look at ways for how we could accommodate those funding shortfalls. And I think everyone knows that as a municipality, we're not allowed to deficit budget. We have to have a balanced budget by the Cities Act.
So in reality, if the resources of the city, what we have available to us decreases, then there's really only two choices. The first choice is more revenues need to be generated, and that's either through tax increases or fee increases primarily. The second option is that fewer costs are incurred, and that usually means that we need to look at services or service levels and some appropriate reductions. So it's important that residents of Regina understand that the revenues that we generate are what deliver programs and services to our residents. So the proposed amendment to the city's budget that you have before you tonight contains some very difficult decisions. As someone that's lived in this community the majority of my life, someone who's raised 5 daughters, the financial situation that we're in is very concerning. And I know we have a gallery of people that are concerned with some of the recommendations that the administration has put in front of you. These are not easy decisions. They're not recommendations that I think either the administration or our elected officials want to be grappling with. So before you discuss these, I want to talk briefly about some of the principles that we put in place in terms of developing these recommendations. And the first is we want to minimize the impact on employees. So while there's almost no way that cuts of this magnitude won't impact our employees in some way, we've worked very hard to make sure that our permanent workforce is protected, and we've limited any requirement for staff reductions or layoffs. It's also important that we consider the impact on residents. So we've tried to be thoughtful about the impact in terms of cost perspective and service perspectives. So again, it's not possible to completely prevent impacts when we're dealing with such a sizable financial reduction. So we've made every effort to protect those, and we've ensured that in the areas of safety and security that those have not been negatively affected. The other is in planful decision making. So we've worked really hard to try and find the balance between having to make recommendations quickly and making long-term service delivery decisions without having sufficient data. So some of the recommendations in front of you are for one-time service or cost reductions, and that's primarily to give the administration time to go away and do some rather extensive reviews in a number of areas so that we can come to council in 2018 and make recommendations that have been clearly thought through, and we've evaluated the impacts both on residents and organizations that we work with. The other is to ensure long-term sustainability. Internally, we talk about let's not kick the can down the road. And back in 2012, the City of Regina had a fairly significant infrastructure gap. I know that's been talked about on the floor of council many, many times. So we weren't saving enough money in terms of being able to invest for asset renewal, and our asset-based services were really falling into decline. So as an example, our residential roads, they were in very poor condition, and we didn't have funding available to make investments. And council has taken some very wise investment decisions in terms of protecting and preserving the residential road network. So we began a strategic effort at that time to put ourselves in a much better position 5 years later. So in 2012, our annual investment in our operating dollars into the capital program, which we call current contributions to capital, was $13 million. In 2017, we've grown that to $40 million. So we're making an investment in our infrastructure. In 2012, few of our assets had asset management plans. We did not have strategies to fund the future in terms of the asset renewal, and in many cases, we didn't understand really the liability in terms of the assets and what we would be responsible to repair and replace into the future. Now we have plans. We have plans for our utility. We have plans for our facilities. We have plans for the new stadium, and we have plans for the wastewater treatment plant. And we're building plans in a number of our other asset classes. So in addition, we have a long-range financial model, and that model will help us understand the impact of decisions that we make in terms of our assets and costs into the future. And we're establishing and building reserves to take care of our assets in terms of renewal and understanding of our liability. And these reserves are based on a key public policy principle, and that is that the users of the assets today should contribute to the upgrading, renewing, and replacement of the assets into the future. So because of our strategies and our necessary progress in this area, a key principle of our work over the past several weeks, and I think it's really important that, the provincial budget was announced on March 22nd. We've really had just a little over 2 weeks to look at developing the recommendations that we have put in front of you tonight. But in terms of our approach, in terms of maintaining reserves and maintaining that capital, we've not wanted to put any of that into jeopardy. So in other words, we don't want to just kick the can further down the road. So you don't see any recommendations in front of you tonight that reduce our capital plans, and we've not made any recommendations that would allocate reserve funds. Reserve funds provide only one-time resources, and they undermine our ability to renew our assets into the future. So just to reiterate, we do not recommend filling permanent holes with temporary funding. We also understand that through all of this, the administration needs to deliver services as cost effectively as possible. And we work on continuous improvement every day. We made a commitment that administratively we would find $2.5 million in administrative savings, and even in this difficult time, we're committed to that. In addition, we have found another $570,000 through this process to further the cost reduction, which ultimately reduces the impact on the mill rate or on services that we provide to citizens. So, in addition to the original budget that was approved on February 13th, we're recommending the following revisions for 2017. That we increase the mill rate by a further 2.5%, which will have an estimated average household impact of an additional $3.87 per month. That we increase fees on street and parking permits by 20%. And that we reduce services by $2.8 million, of which $874,000 are one-time costs. The Regina Police Service, who have joined us here this evening, they've recommended that they reduce their capital budget by $572,000 and that they transfer $428,000 from their capital budget from the Regina Police General Reserve. So that's a total of $1 million in one-time savings. So with the increased pressure in 2018 on the cost and the total of $2.1 million in one-time cost reductions, the challenge that we're going to face in 2018 means that we need to find $7.5 million. So the impact of going back to the initial comments, it's $10.3 million in 2017. It's 15.7 in 2018. And that gap obviously is funding because we've used some one-time solutions to buy us time to look into the future. We will have a $7.5 million shortfall in 15. So to find resources of that scale requires that we dig deep into what we do and how we do it. And there's a number of recommendations that require the administration to go away and look at services and service levels. And we'll bring recommendations for consideration for the 2018 budget. So the administration, we need to take that time to look at implications, and we want to work with our stakeholders and our partners so that we have the best answers, so that ultimately we can make solid, informed recommendations to City Council. So thank you, and with that, my colleagues and myself will be available to answer any questions throughout the evening.
Thank you, Mr. Holden, for that. We'll now go right into our delegations. We have a number of them here tonight. The first one is Brandon Wright from Bike Regina. Mr. Wright, if you could identify yourself for the record, who you represent. You have 5 minutes for a presentation, and there may be questions afterwards.
Good evening. My name is Brandon Wright. I'm a director with Bike Regina Cycle Advocacy Group. It was unfortunate to hear about the removal of provincial grants, and while we understand the difficult task of having to reevaluate the budget, we are hoping that Council and the administration will respect the ongoing need to build and improve cycling infrastructure, making cycling as a form of transportation more accessible to the city's residents, and in turn making the roads safer for all users. Design Regina, our city's official community plan, OCP, was established through a 4-year process including 2 years of extensive public and stakeholder engagement and was approved in 2013. It is intended to be used to direct growth and change in our city for the foreseeable future. Design Regina's citywide policies regarding transportation outline 5 specific goals, 4 of which speak directly to an improved environment for cycling. These goals include promoting active transportation for healthier communities, offering a range of year-round transportation choices for all, including cycling routes, integration of transportation and land use planning to better facilitate walking, cycling, and transit trips, optimization of road network capacity through encouraging alternative modes like cycling. The previous budget items aligned with the OCP goals and indicators have generally not been implemented despite receiving specific council approval. Examples of previous budget items include pilot project and studies pertaining to pedestrian, cycling, transit, and vehicle infrastructure in the 2014 budget to be implemented in 2015. It was not present in the 2015 budget. Extension of Lawrence Street bike lane from Victoria Avenue to 11th Avenue in the 2015 budget to be implemented in 2015. Just this past fall, 40% completed. The 12th Avenue Bikeway in budget 2015 to be implemented in 2016, not present in the 2016 budget. The study and design of east-west bikeway south of downtown in the 2015 budget to be implemented in 2016, not present in the 2016 budget. Lastly, hiring of Transportation Master Plan Coordinator in the 2016 budget to be implemented in 2016. It was posted this year, but to my knowledge, the position has yet to be awarded. And we ask the Council direct administration to respect the goals of the official community plan in order to ensure the citizen, administration, and Council established vision of Design Regina becomes a reality. Regarding the budget revisit and the reason we are here today, Bike Regina encourages Council to ensure the security of the following 2017 budget items. $500,000 budgeted in 2017 for Louvain Drive and 13th Avenue intersection improvements, including road widening and inclusion of a westbound bike lane on 13th Avenue. TMP priority projects, long-term budgeting of $250,000 per year from 2018 to 2021 for on-street bike lanes and multi-use pathways. Priority winter maintenance on existing bike lanes as it falls within the current maintenance budget, and any and all possible road improvement opportunities that may arise, especially those related to future TMP projects. Budgeting during times of restraint requires innovation. Cycling infrastructure is a strategic investment that can save municipalities money over time. The most obvious savings come from lower road maintenance and life cycle costs as a result of less congestion and wear and tear. Less obvious are the wide-reaching savings associated with having an active community that is healthy, productive, social, and safe. The results from an OCP survey in 2012 show that 65% of residents in Regina would like to cycle, but are hesitant due to infrastructure concerns. These same residents are feeling the pinch and experiencing financial distress today. Safe cycling infrastructure would provide a more economical means of transportation with the potential to attract even more of the city's population. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wright, for your presentation. Other questions of the delegation? Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wright, and I appreciate the work that your organization is doing to keep the importance of cycling in front of us. You mentioned that active community is a safe community. Most people, I think, that wearing bike helmets is a safety feature too. Does your organization endorse the wearing of bicycle helmets, and would it endorse the wearing of bicycle helmets if we increase the cycling network?
Yes, our organization, Bike Regina, is definitely on board with anything that promotes safety. We are not in support of helmet laws for a few different reasons. Laws reduce ridership, thus making cycling less safe for those who choose to cycle. Laws also increase social inequity, making biking less affordable and potentially be finding people who have a hard time affording the helmet. Laws also do not reduce collisions nor protect the body and other vitals. Education for cyclists and motorists does, however, prevent collisions. So we do definitely support helmet use and strive for helmet access for all riders, most importantly people who lack funds and especially children. Some ideas we have around that, which I know Sarah Maria is sitting down with you tomorrow to talk to you. If there are any other council members who are able to join, that would be great. But we have ideas to include bike shops, having them including the cost of the helmet in all bike purchases. If that rider already has a helmet, it can then be donated. In the future, potential for a city grant to provide helmets to those who can't afford them. And Bike Regina is on board to educate and continue to educate safety and properly fit the helmets at our events.
Thank you very much. It seems to me you've given a perfect rationale why we should have compulsory bike helmet laws. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Other questions of the delegation? You've made yourself very clear on your presentation. Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery. And we'll move on to our next delegation, Wilma Staff. Ms. Staff, you're a veteran of this place as a former city councillor. For the record, you identify yourself, who you represent, and you have 5 minutes for your presentation as well.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm Wilma Staff. I'm here this evening representing myself and those in the gallery that are wearing the green ribbons. I watched the March 27th special meeting of Council, and I agree with the Mayor and the councillors' comments about the province's tendency to download its shortfalls onto municipalities. Unfortunately, municipalities are subordinate to the province. As a result, they are at the will of the provincial government when it comes to any finances other than what can be raised through taxes and fees. In light of its current financial situation, I think the city should end the 5-year 100% tax exemption for new rental home construction. That 5-year 100% tax exemption is contributing to the demise of older neighborhoods. Many new builds, due to their height and mass, block the sunlight, compromise the neighbor's privacy, overwhelm the small homes, and destroy the character of our neighborhoods. Funded through taxes, large construction companies disproportionately benefit from this tax exemption and the city's housing grants, as they have the borrowing power to build blocks of new housing units on speculation, while financial constraints limit small contractors and individuals to building neighborhood infills or renovating older homes. By renovating older homes and preserving the integrity and character of the existing neighborhoods, these small companies and individuals are also respecting the city's vision of a substantial community. And construction of these compatible infills and the retention of existing housing stock contributes to the preservation of landfill space, as well as conserving natural resources and energy. Conversely, in older neighborhoods, some larger construction companies preserve nothing. Their working practice is to have a backhoe knock down the existing house, often a livable house, and haul the resulting debris to the dump. Unfortunately, the 100% 5-year tax exemption and housing grants help to fuel this lot clearing practice, as the replacement build is often a tax-exempt cash flow rental. Lot clearing to replace existing livable homes with incompatible housing units is not a sustainable practice and is at odds with City Council's vision statement of a sustainable community. Replacement builds that are not compatible with the existing built forms are a violation of the official community plan and the zoning bylaw. That is a breach of Section 40 of the Planning and Development Act 2007. Section 62(7) of the Act states development permits issued in contravention of the zoning bylaw and the Act are invalid. Tax exemptions erode the tax base, the one source of revenue the city has complete control over. These 5-year 100% tax exemptions are, in addition to grants of $20,000 to $25,000 for the construction of certain rental housing units and $10,000 to $15,000 for certain owner-occupied housing units. The city also subsidizes development development fees. Granted, every new housing unit expands the assessment base, and every increase in assessment creates a broader tax base. But a broader tax base does not necessarily equate to an increase in tax revenue. In fact, tax exemptions and grants that encourage speculative housing construction can result in unsold housing stock, that may lead to tax arrears and the costs of a protracted tax enforcement process.
Ms. Staff, you have 1 minute.
Okay. To provide the services citizens expect and are entitled to by virtue of the municipality's legislative responsibilities, it is essential to protect the tax base. If that obligation is adhered to, the costs to run the municipality will be more fairly distributed amongst all property classes. I support Council's position that it is unfair for the province to download some of its financial shortfalls onto municipalities. I realize City Council is in the untenable position of having to make some unpopular decisions. That said, City Council must consider the appropriateness of introducing substantial increases to cover the revenue shortfall while continuing to provide the 5-year 100% tax exemption. My purpose in being here tonight, along with those who have signed the supplemental pages related to Attachment A, is to ask City Council to end the 100% 5-year tax exemption, which is helping to fuel the destruction of older neighborhoods, stop issuing development permits for builds that do not comply with the official community plan, and to violate the Act.
Ms. Staff, I have to stop you there. Unfortunately, your 5 minutes are up. But there may be questions from members of Council to amplify what you're saying.
Okay.
Questions for the delegation? Councilor O'Donnell.
Evening, Ms. Staff. Haven't seen you for a while. Nice to see you.
No, I don't like to come here too often. I don't want you.
Your smile is just.
Why not? You're looking happy.
Well, I must admit, it does seem very familiar. I almost put my hand up when you were asked to vote.
Just one kind of off-the-record question. When you were on council, did you ever have to open your budget after setting a budget?
No, we didn't, but I will tell you, we did, you know that when I was on council, we did the Louvain Expressway, or Louvain Drive. And we were called to a special meeting one evening, and we were advised we were $5 million overexpended on an $8 million project. And we were not happy. In today's funds, I would say that's something to around $23 to $25 million.
Good.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. I want to go back to what you presented, and you
Yes.
caught my attention a little bit. But if you're okay, first I'm going to step back. And I'm not sure exactly what year, but I'm going to go back maybe 8 years. And what I seem to remember was that the rental vacancy rate at that time was something like 1%. Does that sound familiar to you?
Yes, it was very difficult. And I know City Council, I know that what you did was the right thing to do. However, the vacancy rate is significantly different now.
Understood, but I just want to make sure that we all hear the same story. Not everybody
Right.
was here. So if I go back about that 8 years, this was one of the methods that we tried to use to make sure that there was rental accommodation. So that would be accurate?
Yes, that's right.
Now, if I go back also quite a few years, it seemed to me a lot of houses in both my neighborhood, and I'm thinking of Rosemont because I represent the area, had basement suites. Then there was a period of time, I'm going to say a couple of decades, where basement suites were never part of housing. Would that be accurate? Do you remember in your time on council, the building permits coming forward without suites?
Yeah, but I think there were a lot of unapproved suites in the city at one time, too.
Yeah, let's agree to that as well.
I think we had the problem,
Yeah, so there was some of this as well.
yes.
Then also, if I go back a number of years, again, I'll say 8 or 9, we had some vacant land, and we used to go with Habitat for Humanity and say, hey, are you interested? And I think really what we ended up with it was Habitat for Humanity in Regina is one of the very strongest in Canada. Does that sound familiar as well and accurate?
Yes, and I volunteered for Habitat for Humanity.
Good. So some of those things were as a result of a period in time when we had some difficulties. So do I summarize you by saying those times are past and take a look at it again?
Well, thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Yes, that's exactly what I'm trying to get at here.
Okay.
Yes, I think it's time.
Okay. And if I could ask one last one. think there are some infill houses that are very appropriate and have met the need. Are you also suggesting there are some that are by size and not just stature and height and so on, but that are inappropriate? Do I summarize you accurately?
Yes, that's true.
Thanks.
And they're popping up in the neighborhood I'm in many neighborhoods, older neighborhoods in Regina.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Other questions of the delegation? Councillor Young?
Thank you, Mrs. Staff, for coming this evening. You sent me some of those questions today, and I knew some of the answers, but I didn't know all of them, and so I have some for you that I will be able to send to you. But I think that what Councillor O'Donnell said, that this is something that we look at and that we will be looking at that. But do you realize that that's not something we can do within the next few days in order to put this budget out, that this is a long-term change that we'll be making and looking at over the next year?
I think the situation is such that the infills are being built as quick as they can go up, these massive structures. If you look around the city, you'll see holes dug in a lot of places. This is causing people distress. I know. I was out there talking to people. And I realize it takes a certain period of time to do things.
Yeah.
So, but no, you have to deal with your budget first, of course. That's your first priority.
But we certainly are going to be looking at that as we go along.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Other questions? Thank you, Ms. Staff. You can return to the gallery, and we'll move on to our next delegation, Jim Elliott. Mr. Elliott, if you could identify yourself for the record, who you represent. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and members of council may have questions afterwards.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. My name is Jim Elliott, and I'm here representing myself, but as I've put in my brief, as I read this proposed cuts to the programs and increases in your taxes to a number of my friends and colleagues, I clearly feel I represent them as well. As I read what is being proposed as budget cuts and tax increases, it is my hope that you spent a lot of time this weekend and for the foreseeable future assessing what you're doing if you pass these draconian cuts and tax increases. By doing what you might do, in my mind, you're as bad or as ideologically against the very fabric that is this city and this province as the Bradwell government, who will push this onto your plate. So far, I've heard no outrage or anger. I've heard no public responses. And tonight I wish to ask you a number of questions that it would be my hope that you would respond publicly tonight to them. Question number 1 is, why are you punishing the children that want to play in the summer in our programs of play escapes? What are children to do with the 2 months of the summer without educational and recreational opportunities to look forward to each and every day? My second question is, why are you punishing the low person on the totem pole who has to work on the statutory holidays just to keep their minimum wage job, but now do not have a way of getting to their work by use of transit? Question number 3, why do we not want people to see their families or holidays or get out to national, provincial, and local festive events such as Remembrance Day, Waskimo, or the Cathedral Village Arts Picnic? And question number 4 is, why are we backtracking on waste recycling and diversion when we should be increasing the amount of material recycling rather than taking 1 step forward and 2 steps back by eliminating the leaf and yard waste, household hazardous waste, as well as tree cycling programs? What I see in this proposed budget change is outright social abandonment, something that we clearly have seen from the Saskatchewan Party and the Harper governments. Where is the hope that we are going to be more sustainable and inclusive? Why is there a sense of fatalism portrayed by you, our council? Why are you giving up? The Wall government broke a contractual agreement with the city of this province. They should be taken to court and forced to fulfill their obligations under the contract that they have with the citizens of this province. How can we fight injustice together with our elected officials when you, our elected officials, pass on that same injustice to their own citizens? My solution to this situation is simple. Join the growing number of cities to take the provincial government to court and force them to return the grants in lieu. In my mind, this will eventually return the grants in lieu to this city as well as others. And secondly, I would use the remainder of the 2016 surplus, some $9.9 million that was discussed in February of this year, only a couple of months ago, and put that into replacing the losses proposed. And if there is still a need for a small amount to balance the budget, I would suggest then to go to the tax rate increases. But it would be my suggestion or my thoughts that it would be clearly less than the 2.5% you're proposing. Those are my comments.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Elliott. Are there questions of the delegation? Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery, and we will now move on to delegation number 40, Chad Novak. Good afternoon, Mr. Novak. If you could identify yourself for the record, who you represent. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and members of council may have questions after.
Pardon me. Still battling this cold. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chad Novak, and I am here representing the Saskatchewan Taxpayers Advocacy Group, which is a grassroots organization proudly standing up for the rights of individual taxpayers. I am amazed, and I want to say thank you for everybody turning out tonight. I'm here to address the 2017 revised City of Regina budget. Pardon me. I want to first extend my sincerest gratitude and appreciation to our Premier, Mr. Brad Wall. Yes, I said that. Now I'm sure many of you are thinking, Chad, why on earth would you want to thank our Premier for putting us into this predicament? Well, let me explain. First off, let me be very clear. The budget released on March 22nd was probably the scariest budget that I have ever been witness to in my 41 years in this great province. From drastic cuts to our most vulnerable, to further tax breaks to corporate funds, it was honestly light years beyond what even my wildest imaginations could have thought that the Wall government would have dared put us in. Now, that being said, it is only because of this budget that the general public seem to have finally woken up from the slumber of putting unwavering trust in their governments, including the City of Regina. It is because of this budget that for the first time in a long time, there have been some outstandingly honest and frank comments by city councillors who I never would have expected them from. The one that sticks out in my head is that of Councillor Hawkins, with his remark of this budget being like a thief in the night. Now, for that comment alone, my perception of this councillor has forever changed, for the better, of course. Now, on to the subject of the revised budget, which in my opinion is completely backwards thinking from what it should be focusing on. There seems to have been minimal effort put forward by this administration. And I mean, it seems to have started out promising, whether it actually attempted meaningful action by considering real spending cuts. But unfortunately, they missed the boat entirely on where the real spending revisions ought to be focused on. For example, as of May 2016, the City of Regina has over 700 employees making 6 figures. And it's no secret that there are several layers of management within the City of Regina organization. This has long been criticized by city workers. Now, for me, this would have been the first place that I would be looking at to save some real money. Secondly, speaking of overpaying, how about we take a look at the growing number of sole source contracts that are being awarded, where questions have been raised by the private industries as to the validity of the pricing of these projects. From the glockenspiel, to the recycling, to the food and beverage service at the stadium, to the Pacer ballpark relocation, which is something new that nobody has heard of yet. millions of tax dollars being expended with little to no accountability from anyone but internal staff. This warrants immediate attention from an independent third party with no conflict of interest, perceived or otherwise. Next, let's actually look at reducing budgets where they continually come to you asking for 5 to 7% increases year over year, with little to no public questioning, such as the Regina Police Service. All due respect, Mr. Bray. Yes, I know they are being asked to take a very minimal hit tonight, but that does not impact the long-term financial outlook in any meaningful way. Instead, the RPS saying, we need this money to operate, why don't you respond to them with, you know what, we're giving you this amount.
Like you have 1 minute to go.
I don't agree.
You do.
Fine. We're giving you this amount. If you can't operate with that figure, then make it happen. You do this all the time with the great community organizations who come to you asking for property tax breaks or grants, so why don't you do it with your own organizations? Finally, let's consider the ever-growing financial reserves. Well, over the past 3 years alone, the City of Regina has realized nearly $30 million in surpluses. Keeping in mind, this is over and above the already budgeted transfers to reserves. Now, this tells me that you are significantly overcharging citizens already. After all of those avenues have been exhausted, then and only then should you be looking at cutting essential services like transit on staff holidays, yard-based recycling, or air-conditioned transit services. 20 seconds left. And only in the most extreme circumstances should you ever be okay with coming back to these taxpayers for more money. I thank you for your time this evening, and I know I don't have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Nowak. Order, please. Order. Order. There's no clapping in the gallery, please. Questions of the delegation?
Any questions?
There are no questions.
Thank you very much.
You can return to the gallery and move on to our next delegation. John Klein. Mr. Klein, welcome back to City Council. You tell us your name, who you represent, and you have 5 minutes for your presentation as well.
All right, thank you, Your Worship. I have a list of changes I'd suggest to make to the budget. First off, it's more important to me that we build our public services than hold taxes low. So the city's been able to dig deep for the Rough Riders in the past, and now it's time to come through for equally important libraries, schools, public transportation, recycling, and reducing our world-leading air pollution figures. Cities should buy Saskatchewan Transportation Corporation buses. That's Regina, Saskatoon, maybe Moose Jaw should buy some buses and operate a transit service between major cities. It's really a shame that the province has cut this and has left this to the cities to maybe take care of transportation for their citizens. Even though the government's fallen down on the job, it doesn't mean we have to lose ground-based public transportation to our closest neighboring urbans and their services. As you know, Regina has no via train service, and it's madness to lose our bus routes to Saskatoon, Weyburn, Estevan, Yorkton, and other cities. We must not let it happen. Regina, Saskatoon, and Moose Jaw all have transportation services that they operate, and they could be extended to enhance intercity transportation options that were lost with the pending closure of STC. Second, ensure the Regina Public Library can function the best it can with the loss of the interlibrary loans program due to provincial anti-education cuts. And next, if you dare to think of closing public pools for the season to save money, I want to see it to be only because it's being repaired properly during the closure to make the pool last for decades more. Next, do not end holiday bus service. As another delegation pointed out, it's really kicking people who are working in difficult jobs where they have to work on holidays to cut that service. And it's one of the few areas that Council had permitted Regina Transit to improve upon in recent years. So it would be taking a large step backward to deny people that important service and cause uncertainty about the availability of transit in Regina on any given holiday. Next, to save money, reverse the earlier decision to give $193,000 to Wascana Centre to extend the parking lot at Candy Cane Park. Paving more of the park for cars does not fit with the official community plan sustainability requirements that Bike Regina brought up this evening. People can park at the Science Center's new lot and walk or park on Broder Street or any number of the residential streets within walking distance there. If the apparent safety problem is due to illegally parked cars, as I was told by Wascana Center, ticket and or tow them. Boom, revenue. People can also take Regina Transit to the location on number 15, which is another reason you shouldn't cut holiday service. Instead, add a sidewalk to Victoria Avenue east of Park Street to connect downtown to points in East Regina. Connect Regina Avenue sidewalk to the multi-use pathway at the Regina Airport that they've built to the bridge at Sandra Schmerler Way near SaskTel International. It's really shameful that there's no safe active transportation options to our airport or to our entire northeast side of our city from this spot that I'm standing on. Spend enough on cycling infrastructure to ensure that there's more than one project this season to improve the safety of children on bikes in our city. Enough men have died on bikes in Regina in the past year to make most people realize that it's crucial we fix our streets' level of safety. You can put the right sort of lanes, bollards, and paint down while crews are repaving any given street this year like they'll be doing anyway, so it meets a modern safe standard.
Mr. Klein, you have 1 minute.
Thanks. The city has promised to do this for years, so make sure it happens this year. Set aside $10,000, is the next item, to spend on renewable energy equipment so the city can finally generate more renewable power than I do for our electrical grid with a modest investment 2 years ago. The city would also surpass the province's contribution to renewable energy on our electrical grid. This should especially appeal to you, I think, after the province's mismanagement and unkind cuts made tonight's meeting necessary. Additionally, garbage pickup going to bi-weekly is a positive change, and I'm glad that's being made. And I think you mentioned in the budget changes that household hazardous waste collection might be discontinued at household hazardous waste days, so I hope that's not discontinued. And I'm glad you're not advertising about road repairs, because that's not really great. You could instead sweep the bike lanes so there's not piles of sand in them.
Mr. Klein,
Thank you.
I ask you to stop there. Sorry,
I'm done. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Questions of the delegation? You made yourself perfectly clear.
Thank you.
Very much. You can return to the gallery, and we will now ask Mr. Doug Norman to come forward, please. Order, please. No reaction from the gallery, please. So, Norman, if you could identify yourself, and so you have someone else coming up there with you, 2 other people, identify who's with you. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions afterwards.
Okay, good evening, Your Worship, and members of City Council. I am Doug Norman, and I am the first Vice President of the Regina Lawn Bowling Club. This is Murray Patulli. He's also a member of the Regina Lawn Bowling Club, and he's also the Treasurer of Bowls Canada. And this is John Patulli. He's a member of the Regina Lawn Bowling Club. The Regina Lawn Bowling Club appreciates the city's current budget circumstances and the need to identify cost savings, such as the proposal to close the Leslie Lawn Bowling Greens. Prior to the evening of April 7th, the club had received no prior notice on this proposed closure. We do not know what makes up the projected $65,300 cost savings or how our yearly $25,000 payment is factored into this figure. Rather than closure of the facility, we believe there are other options to consider that would result in a win-win situation for both the city and the club. The club is willing to discuss all options, including taking over the operation of the facility, but we need time to negotiate so we can achieve a favorable resolution for both parties. In the interim, it is imperative we continue to operate the Regina Lawn Bowling Club while these discussions take place, so we can transition to a workable solution. Most, if not all, of the major cities in Canada have a lawn bowling facility. Closing the facility leaves no option for Regina lawn bowlers to continue to participate in their sport and creates major impacts on the sport provincially and nationally. We feel there are better places for the city to find cost savings than to go after a facility that meets the recreational and social needs of so many people and is part of the basic fabric that makes our city so special. Our 2006 membership was 154. There were 44 members aged 54 and under, and 110 members 55 plus. Here's some history on the club. The Regina Lawn Bowling Club celebrated its 100th anniversary in 2012. It has provided recreational and competitive opportunities for lawn bowlers from the ages of 8 to over 90 by introducing the sport to junior players and keeping many Regina seniors physically active and socially engaged. Lawn bowling is a lifelong sport that all family members can play. A former mayor of the city was instrumental in creating the current location and footprint of our club. Some community involvement statistics. The Regina Lawn Bowling Club exists for its members and many other Regina citizens. In 2016, we had 70 school bookings involving 1,500 students from 12 schools, 20 corporate bookings involving 500 people, 10 social bookings involving 150 people. One of the corporate bookings was a charity fundraiser for kids' sport. For 2017, we already have a charity fundraiser booked for Diabetes Canada, who expects to raise $15,000, and I believe that they have sent a letter of support to council already. We have a charity league that expects to raise $55,000 for a charity to be determined. Kids' sport is back again. A number of schools have already booked, and we have a Canada 150 event is planned because lawn bowling is one of the recognized activities. Immediate issues. The Regina Lawn Bowling Club is scheduled to host 4 provincial Bowl SAS Lawn Bowling Championships in 2017, with the winners to attend the championships later in the year. Closing the club would severely affect the plans for these Bowl SAS events and the aspirations of all our competitive bowlers. The club is also scheduled to host a provincial tournament for recreational bowlers in 2017. Some other organizations that are affected by the closure. Bowl SAS membership would be reduced by 40%, which would likely lead to the demise of Bowl SAS and the elimination of executive director position. Bowl SAS funding from
Mr.
SAS
Mayor, we have 1 minute to go.
is tied to that. Bowls Canada is another affected organization. The president and treasurer of Bowls Canada are both from our club. Bowls Canada likes the Regina Club because it's a favorite hosting facility, and the information that I've provided there is outlines all that. There was a little study done from the decade of 2000 to 2009, and all the national championships that came to the city generated $750,000 for the city. We have a world champion at our club. There's only 2 Canadian world champions. One is from our club. We have 5 members that have attended the Commonwealth Games. 4 of them are still active. We have many members on the national teams, and there's other achievements there. Just in closing, I'd say closing the Regina Lawn Bowling Greens to save $65,300 will affect many more people than just the RLBC membership. The club is an integral part of keeping Regina citizens active. Rather than arbitrarily making the decision to close the facility, we strongly encourage an immediate dialogue between the city and the RLBC to see what options there are to preserving the 104-year history of the club in Regina and to save the legacy of this club for past and future members and champions.
Yeah, okay, just a bit over time there, but you have a question. Councillor Flagel has a question. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. Gentlemen and the rest of the gallery, welcome. I didn't catch, did you introduce the gentleman with you?
You introduced
John?
him?
Okay. So the younger of the 2 Patulis, tell me your history with the ball, with the lawn bowling, because it's pretty unique to have, well, you're not so young anymore, but you used to be young.
No editorial comment, Councillor Flagel.
I'm not 30 yet, so I'm still young.
Okay, you're good, yeah. Okay. So I'd like to know a little bit about why lawn bowling is important to you and where it took you. I guess is my first.
So I practically was raised on the greens. I'd say next to maybe my parents and probably my education, lawn bowling was that next home for me. So, and different things that I've been able to do. I've won 7 Canadian championships already in my life. Got to win 1 with my dad, got to win a couple with my brother, and I got to win 1 with my mom. I don't think there's any other sport where you would have that type of opportunity. On top of that, I've bowled in every province in Canada except for Newfoundland and Quebec, and I've also bowled all over the world, which has helped me see the world. I've bowled in the United States, Australia, Malaysia, Hong Kong, mainland China and the Netherlands.
And did you always represent Regina?
Absolutely, yep.
So you
Our
weren't-
club's known all around the world. It's one of the, especially across Canada and all over the world, we're known all over the place for having a great facility.
In your mind today, what does it do for kids' activities as a younger person?
I think it taught me a lot of things growing up, all the important things that I think just about any sport could give you. I think this taught me sportsmanship, dedication, adversity, gave me some physical activity, and everything else in between. It gave me the competition to strive to be better, gave me adversity when I would lose, because I didn't do very well in some international competitions, but that's all right.
So would you characterize, because a lot of the perception of lawn bowling is that it's for the elite and the seniors. Obviously, you're not elite and you're not a senior. So what would you say to a comment like that?
I'd say I'm getting old now on the elite side. Last year at Nationals, I was actually an older member of Team Saskatchewan. We have a bunch of members out here behind us tonight that would show you that. Some are still in their teens, and we have lots of young members. Most of our competitive members, I'd say, are under the age of 30 now.
Okay. Maybe you can't answer, but maybe somebody else can. I understand that lawn bowling puts in $25,000 to, now, you can tell me, is it before the 65 or after the 60? Does it bring it down to 65 or does it bring it down to 40?
Well, my understanding is it would bring it down to 40.
Okay.
But I don't know that for sure, but that's my understanding.
Okay, we'll ask that of the administration another time. But there's also an administrative fee of $11,000 on my understanding. Do you know what that's about?
I have no idea.
Okay. Okay, we can ask that as well. Murray, Mr. Patulli, do you know? You're the numbers guy, so.
Bowls Canada, though.
Oh, okay, okay. The history of you guys in lawn bowling, it's 104 years old. Why do you think it's still being successful, and why are we generating success nationally?
Well, it's a lifelong sport. You can start when you're 8 and you can still play when you're 90. So
Right.
it's something you can play for the duration of your life.
Right. The
And
membership today is how many?
last year it was 154.
154. Okay, perfect. Thank you, and we'll be talking about it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Flake. Councilor O'Donnell.
Thanks. Evening, gentlemen. Nice to see you have lots of friends with you. I like that. I want to just ask a few questions. Your submission is very good, but I want to delve into it a little bit. Your membership at 154, has that been consistent for a while? Is that where you've been at for, give or take the last decade?
It's actually rising.
Okay.
Last year, I think the number in 2015 was 138, and in the previous year it was 121 or something like that.
Okay, good. When you talk about the school bookings in particular, or corporate bookings, is that also on the rise, or is that something that you've solicited to try and have more people come into the facility and use it? Is this an active part of your club?
I'd say the bookings are on the rise. We actively promote it to all organizations, and we get a lot of repeat people coming back, and then they spread the word, and we get new people coming in as a result.
Sure. And when those folks come in, are they paying you a rental fee for using the facility?
Yes, they are.
Thanks. Seems to be some confusion, and we'll have to clarify about numbers, but am I correct that you pay $25,000 a year to the city of Regina for the use of the facility? Is that correct?
We pay $25,000 a year, and our understanding is that's for the maintenance of the greens.
So for the maintenance. And would that number be consistent with what you paid for the last number of years? Is that on the rise or down, or where did that 25 come from and when?
25,000 started in 2014, so 14, 15, and 16 it was 25,000. Previous to that, it was 17,000.
Okay, so it went up a little bit. When you see the number 65,000, do you assume, because I need to understand, do you assume that you are being, I lost my word here, do you assume that you are being, some benefit that we're subsidizing, that's the word I'm looking for, sorry, subsidizing your efforts, or do you assume at 25,000 you're paying all the costs? Just push that button again, if you don't mind. There you go.
I'd say at 25,000, we're probably not paying all the costs, but I don't know what all the costs are.
Sure, okay, thanks. So when you kind of are making an offer here to sit down with city administration and negotiate, and the reference here was made to taking over the club. What does that mean to you?
That would mean that we would be the people that would maintain the greens.
Okay. And because I've been there, and I think the phrase was, I awakened the greens. Is that
Yes.
what I did? I woke the greens, okay.
Yes, that's what you did.
Okay, good. It was fun, by the way. So do I assume then clubhouse, so you're talking about the greens, I know there's a clubhouse and so on. So are you offering, or thinking of, anyway, taking over the whole operation, maintenance of the clubhouse, maintenance of the greens, just so that I understand?
Our initial thought would just be the maintenance of the greens. The clubhouse might remain with the city.
Okay.
Because you own the building.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, I think that's good for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor O'Donnell. Councilor Bresciani.
Perfect. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for being here and being an advocate for the Lawn Bowling Association. I want to just ask just a couple of questions quickly. Now, has there been discussions with the city prior to this in talking about closing the facility at all?
None.
Like not in previous years? There's been no discussion at all?
None.
No? Okay. And so then they obviously notified you to tell you that this was going to be happening?
Well, we first found out about it. One of our members saw it on the news on Friday evening at 6 o'clock. That was the first we knew about it, and that member contacted the secretary, and the secretary contacted our communications director, and she went into our website to see if there was anything in there, and there was some information under a group booking, which we thought was just someone from the city wanting to book the facility, but that's where they entered the information that we were going to be closed. So we found out about it by accident, basically.
Okay, well, number one, thank you for being here, because that's, we have to obviously do a better job on engagement, for sure. So I guess the other question I have is you've talked a little bit about the tournaments you're going to have, and you've got some already, and big ones for 2017. How would that affect your organization, and could they be rescheduled, or is this they're booked and they have to go?
Well, they have to be played. If the facility is closed, they can't be played here, so Bull Sask would have to determine where they're going to play them and how they're going to continue to have these tournaments go ahead.
Okay. And one last question. So having these events, though, they would obviously help you financially, your club as well, help, with other little funds on the side. Would that be accurate?
That's accurate. For every provincial tournament, Bull Sask pays the host club a fee to host the tournament. So there is some revenue coming to the club by hosting it.
Excellent. And again, I just want to say thank you for being here, because I think, the organization also, you've got seniors, you've got all ages, and I think in our city, we are promoting activity, and this is one way for all ages to be engaged, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bresciani. Councilor Hawkins.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Mr. Norman, I have a couple of numbers questions, and you may not have this information, but I want to just check. First of all, do the 154 members pay fees to your organization?
Yes.
And what are the fees scale like?
The fee is $160 for the year.
And what does that get them?
That gets them the ability to lawn bowl every day from the middle of May to the end of September. And also the ability to enter these provincial tournaments if they wish to do that.
And I'm interested in knowing, are there any revenue, does the clubhouse generate revenue in any way? Do you sell things there, food, anything at all? Do you generate revenue from the clubhouse?
We generate some money from beverage and pop sales. And we also, on occasion, we have a bar that we generate revenue from.
Okay, thank you. And what other revenue sources does your club have?
We sell Grey Cup tickets. That's more of a Bull Sask initiative, but all the clubs participate in it. We also have raffles where we raise money, and as I said before, the host clubs for all the provincial tournaments get funded from Bull Sask.
And in a normal year, do you know what your total revenues would be approximately?
About 45,000.
And that includes the fees and everything, doesn't
Yeah.
it? Okay. And do you have any idea what your expenses would be in a normal year?
Very close to that.
Close to that? And so one of those expenses, am I right, I'm asking this, is the $25,000 that you pay to the...
That's correct.
Pay to the city, is that correct? Okay, I think those are my questions. Thank you very much, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Bryce has a question, so we'll see how this works. Councillor Bryce, would you like to ask a question?
Thank you very much. Yes, I'd like to ask, so how do you get people, youth specifically, interested in lawn bowling so that it does continue on?
Well, we have a junior program that we run. Every Wednesday night, we have a junior program for people that are 8 to 18. It's advertised throughout the city, and it's by word of mouth and from people that are already junior members. They might bring their friends, or we go to the schools and get people in. It's just advertising and word of mouth that brings people to the junior program.
Okay, what about kids who can't afford it? How do you get them interested, and do you have any programs for those who can't afford it?
Well, the junior membership, up until last year, the junior membership to play on Wednesday night for the summer was only $20. So it was very, very cheap. But this year, we've increased that to $40 for the year. So they can play for, I think it's 12 weeks for $40. Some juniors take the option of being a full-time member, so they can play any time other than Wednesday night. So they would be subject to an $80 fee.
And for families who can't afford that, is there anything that you have in place for them?
We do, for some special circumstances, we do have a reduced rate, quite a reduced rate for people that are physically challenged. So we do have a reduced rate for those people.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. I move on to Councillor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship. My questions were in regards to membership fees and revenues, so they've already been answered. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you very much for attending this evening, and presumably these are your friends and the folk we've been hearing from all day. So thank you very much for your determination. So what has been very helpful here is the fact that you've demonstrated how important and how lively the space is and the community is in Regina. And it's interesting for me because you're quite engaged in that space. I can't think of another civic center or park in which community members are actually part of the upkeep of that facility, actually keeping it alive. But I have a what-if question. I think it's kind of been alluded to in some of your remarks about the nature of the lawn bowling community here in Regina. What if it shuts down? What happens to lawn bowling in Regina and Saskatchewan? And what happens to the community groups that seem to find a home in the current space?
I think the thing that we have to keep in mind is if it's shut down tomorrow, we've got an impact on the club. We have a couple of young folks that are on the Canadian national team. They're going to Australia. If they're successful from their small group, they'll be playing at the Commonwealth Games. If the club shuts down, we lose our local events. We lose our ability for some of these people that are striving for excellence to achieve that. The provincial association would be impacted because we lose a significant number of members. We probably wouldn't be able to keep the provincial association going. And ultimately, the impact on Bowls Canada is the loss of significant membership. I might add that we're on the short list for sports that will be added to the Olympic Games. Bowls Canada has made a submission through World Bowls, and when you look at the opportunities for some of our competitive younger bowlers, this opportunity wouldn't be there.
Thank you. I guess my final question, we've had delegates here before, I think it was the last budget deliberation, and I think this is kind of the logic that's motivating this, is we don't need to be in the lawn bowling business, for lack of a better word here. What do you say to that? As a city, we shouldn't be in this. What do you say?
And I would say, why would you say that?
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Other questions? Councillor Young?
May I make a comment as well as a question?
Probably just a question.
Okay, just a question.
Maybe
Well, I'll frame my comment like a question. I had the opportunity to visit you one evening to bring greetings on behalf of the mayor, I believe, and I had never been there before, and it's a beautiful place. But one of the things that I heard and understood, and I didn't hear that this evening, and I wanted that to be public, do you do other upkeep and work around the clubhouse and on the greens to keep it looking the way it does? Besides just paying the city for the greens, do you do other work?
Yes, we do. Club members are responsible for cutting the grass outside of the playing surface, so it's a very big yard, so it takes about 2 hours a week to cut our grass, and that's using 3 lawnmowers, so 3 members doing that every week, 2 hours a week. And we plant all the flowers that go around that clubhouse. I don't know, you would have seen them. So that's responsibility of the club. We clean the ditches of the playing surface. We maintain everything inside that fence. Clubhouse, we clean the clubhouse. So we do a lot of volunteer stuff there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Frondura.
Thank you, Your Worship. Scene of green here. It's good to see that. First, I thought there's a Rider game on or something. Question is the nonprofits. You mentioned in your submission that nonprofits benefit quite a bit from your organization. I mean, that would be a huge loss. What do you say to that?
Well, yeah, it would be if the facility wasn't there, it would be a huge loss to not only the Regina Lawn Bowling Club, but to all the organizations who want to come there and use the facility. And these charity events that we host, they wouldn't be able to do that if they hadn't the facility to use it. So
the next question, or part of the comment and the question is, we're talking about money, but this is more involved than just money. It's a social. I mean, you're losing. I'm saying you're losing a lot of the social thing that's happening. People have places to go. There's money, but so the question: what would the impact? The question was asked: the impact of that social activity, places to go, and have a place to, community, be busy. What would that mean?
Well, those individuals would have to find another activity to engage with other people, and I don't know what activity that might be, but you would be taking away an activity that a lot of people enjoy, so they would have to find something to substitute that.
Okay, then now one more question is that you have individuals that are going away, to Australia, a place like that. So what would the impact be on individual, a player or a family? You have to go somewhere else. Like, see, you have to drive 2 hours to get somewhere, to practice, whatever.
Well,
I'll take that one.
take that one.
Honestly, if the club closed, I don't know if I could continue lawn bowling. I'd have to make a decision basically to leave the city, would have to be the decision I'd have to make. There's no other alternative here, so closest reasonable club would be Saskatoon or Winnipeg, and I don't have the time based on work commitments to travel 2.5 hours each way to play, so I'd have to make the decision to basically retire from lawn bowling or uproot and leave. That would really be from my position as a competitive player.
Thank you for that. In fact, then, Your Worship, My email hasn't buzzed so much like today. I was wondering what was going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Findera. Other questions? I have just a couple of questions about process. You understand that tonight we are not making a decision right now about it's a proposed cut. It is from the administration that has not been decided by council yet. You understand that? Because some of the kind of comments I heard earlier was that we were closing. We have not made that decision yet, so you understand that.
I understand that, so does that mean we can continue to take bookings?
Well, I think we'll deal with this in short order. We'll deal with it in short order. So I just wanted to explore, again, and maybe you answered the question, so I apologize for this, the offer for a more favorable resolution to both parties. And to me, that's an important point you made. It shows the sincerity of what you're asking for, and it's rare to see so many people mobilize so quickly. I can tell you that in a very respectful way. Can you just outline what you would expect to see or want to contribute to help get this issue off the table?
Well, we would like to, first of all, find out how the 65.3 and the 25,000,
okay,
what that means. We don't know. Is it really 40,300? That'd be the first thing, and then we would like to know what would make up that difference, like what goes into that, say, 40,300, and then how could the club absorb some of that cost?
Okay, so you need more information to come forward with some
Yes.
solutions then. Okay, that sounds reasonable. Thank you very much. No other questions of the delegation? Thank you so much. You can return to the gallery. Okay, sure. We'll just take a pause here just for one moment, please. Okay, if we'd like to, okay, we'll wait till the gallery's clear then. So we'll continue on once the gallery's cleared. Okay, we'll go on to our next delegation, Mr. John Hopkins. For the record, once again, Mr. Hopkins, if you could identify yourself, and you have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions afterwards.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of Regina City Council. My name is John Hopkins, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Regina and District Chamber of Commerce. I'm here tonight to provide our perspective on the revised budget. Your Worship, I don't believe any of us are here tonight because we want to be. Only a few short months ago, we discussed this matter in some detail. Council made some difficult decisions and concluded that a modest mill rate increase was in order. Tonight, you will have to make more difficult decisions. Prior to the release of this report, we surveyed our membership to determine what they thought. Please rate the following potential sources of revenue or cuts that City Council may be considering. 63% of respondents either supported or absolutely supported lobbying the provincial government to restore grants in lieu funding, particularly in future years, as compared to 15% who were either opposed or absolutely opposed. While the report is virtually silent on this point, we have determined that the door is not shut on these discussions. On the contrary, there is a desire to continue discussions. To that end, we have opened up lines of communication that will be meeting with the provincial government representatives in the not-too-distant future. To be clear, we will present the results of the survey and discuss the concern expressed by our members as it relates to the loss of grant in lieu funding to the City of Regina. 62% of respondents either supported or absolutely supported reducing or eliminating property tax exemptions as compared to 12% who were opposed or absolutely opposed. We note that the report does speak to the property tax exemptions and in particular the pending report. We support this review. 50% of respondents either supported or absolutely supported deferring capital projects or large purchases as compared to 27% who were opposed or absolutely opposed. 51% of respondents either supported or absolutely supported increasing user fees for recreation facilities, landfill fees, and or parking meter fees as opposed to 32% who were opposed or absolutely opposed. 42% of respondents either supported or absolutely supported cuts to programs and or services as opposed to 43% who were opposed or absolutely opposed. 30% of respondents either supported or absolutely supported funding the entire amount through reserves versus 36% who were opposed or absolutely opposed. Your Worship, one of the surprises within the survey is the low rate at which members have indicated that you should be looking at reserves to fund the entire shortfall. While members did not provide information on why, I would venture to say that at least in part it must be due to the realization that reserves are necessary to take advantage of multi-partner infrastructure programs for emergencies like floods and to help offset mill rate increases. 36% either supported or absolutely supported a mill rate increase versus 39% who were opposed or absolutely opposed. Given the uncertainty, which in this case is not entirely a bad thing, we would like to recommend that Council consider taking a multi-pronged approach to the shortfall, including 1, continue grant in lieu discussions with the province of Saskatchewan. 2, defer some one-time capital investments. 3, defer the purchase of some of the 2017 fleet. 4, use some additional funds from the General Fund Reserve, or put another way, use more of the 2016 surplus. 5, look to defer or reduce some programs and or services this year. 6, look at not filling some vacant positions in this budget year. 7, look at reducing or even eliminating some of the property tax exemptions. And finally, 8, look at increasing the mill rate for a portion of the shortfall. Having reviewed this report, we note that a majority of the items on this list have been at a minimum discussed.
You have
and
1 minute to go.
in some cases are being recommended. While technically not part of the discussions tonight, I thought it prudent to also mention that education mill rates have also been increased and will impact the overall property tax bill that ratepayers receive. In closing, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to be here and to provide our members' views and perspectives.
Thank you, Mr. Hopkins, for your presentation of the questions of the delegation. Councillor Massanelli.
Through your worship. Hello again.
Hi.
Did any of your membership advocate for a reduction of services?
Yes.
Did they mention which services in particular or anything that they had an idea for?
There were a number of different things that were talked about in the survey results, and some of them are included in the appendices that are actually attached to this report. And so there were some discussions about looking at lawn bowling. I'm not going to hide behind that, even though there was a delegation here tonight. I'm not going to hide behind that. They said, let's look at it, although I would say that I think the delegation prior to me did a great job. And they asked some really good questions. And I'm not going to presuppose what you are going to do, but I would suggest that maybe you should sit down with them. So I'm not going to hide behind that and say that that's one thing that should be looked at. Transit was another thing that was said to be looked at. Although I would say I thought the numbers would have been much higher than they actually were, but it was another thing to look at. Garbage was another one that people said, let's take a look at that. And again, that's in the report and it's in the appendices. So there's a few others.
And when you mentioned transit and garbage, these are programs that have been planned out for many years. They've been tried to be grown, implemented. Been a lot of funding put into strategies to get people to use them properly. To have a knee-jerk reaction because of a provincial budget and just slice at the bottom, is that ever a really great way to implement change, or is that usually a mistake?
I think there's no discussion to say, let's cut transit altogether. There was no comment, or let's cut garbage altogether. I think that there has been some discussion in terms of looking at, is there ways to find efficiencies within those systems? And I think that's pretty much, I don't want to talk for your administration. They have a lot more people that can talk as opposed to I do, but I think is looking at ways that we could do some cuts around the edges to sort of try and address this issue this year. And again, I come back to the point where I don't believe the door is completely shut on these discussions with the government of Saskatchewan. And, far be it for us that, we're not the kind of organization that's going to say, well, listen, this is your problem. You go solve your problem. We think that this is a partnership. We're in this community together. And so we're actually going to try and be part of the solution. We've set up, I think we've got a date, and that's in the not-too-distant future, where we're going to sit down and talk about the grants in lieu issue with the province of Saskatchewan to see if we can at least be helpful in trying to find a solution.
I appreciate the partnership, first of all, because I know you do speak that way quite well, and I really do appreciate that. I guess what I'm trying to poke at is the fact that we've had mere weeks to process a shortfall of this size. Quick decisions lead to mistakes, and I think that's maybe what put us in the situation to start with. So when I see surveys like the one you've presented, I can see some quick decisions and some attractive ones at that when you look at numbers. But on the other side of that, I also see some real pitfalls by haste or trimming too quickly. So I just wanted to see if there was any points to that in the survey you gave.
And these are suggestions, because we do not have the information to make decisions, particularly in a survey to say, okay, let's see if we can cut $11 million. But these would be suggestions where members that don't have all of the information that you would have or that your administration would have, and saying, okay, where do you think there might be some areas we might be able to look at? And so that would be the intent of providing the information, as opposed to saying, let's cut this. Absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Massanelli. Councillor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship. Mr. Hopkins, thanks for coming out. You indicated earlier that you would be meeting with the province at some point, haven't nailed down a date yet. In that meeting with the province, are you also going to be asking them about the implications of West Canada Centre Authority and how that will affect the vacancy rates of downtown office space, potentially?
The primary reason that we were going to meet with the government was to talk about the grants in lieu issue, as well as some other business-type issues that are important to our membership. If we have and we will have the opportunity, we will have a discussion about the West Canada Centre Authority, but the primary thing would be to have a discussion about grants in lieu, just to be fair.
Yeah. I'd also suggest you do add that in if you can. Thanks.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Murray. Councillor Flagel.
Thanks. Welcome back, Mr. Hopkins. And just getting a feel for if you're more of a like to poke a bunch of holes, or would you like to have a few holes and fix them, as we have the opportunity to do here. And what I mean by that is, would you like to see a modest tax increase, some reserves, some cuts, or would you rather see 100 different things poked at, prodded at, pulled at? What's your philosophy and yours and maybe the Chamber's on doing business that way? What would you like to see?
Well, I think that the results, the results relatively speak for themselves, and it's sort of like, let's take a multi-pronged approach to this and try to take some here, some there, a little bit of reserves, a little bit of mill rate increase. No, I mean, the reality is do people want to pay more? And I know there are some, but the majority would say no. But if it's a modest rate of increase, even though this year there's not going to be anything modest about it, let's be fair, because we're talking about, at least 6%, plus the education property tax increase. So it's not going to be modest, but I think that there's an appreciation that there are a number of things in play this year as compared to any other year. So I think, a little bit in terms of a little bit on the reserves. I wouldn't call it the reserves because I do understand and appreciate the rationale to have reserves is for, when the government of Canada comes out and says, okay, we're going to have a Building Canada fund, and you're going to be able to fix a bridge, because that will qualify, but it needs to be a third, a third, a third. Well, you have to have that third somewhere, and that's the reason to have the reserve. But I look at the surplus as a little different. I mean, that's money that is a surplus before it ever goes into a reserve. I know it's a bit of semantics there. But we did have, I think, Jim said something like $9 million was left from the 2016 surplus. So not using all of it, but a portion of that, a portion on mill rate, a portion on some deferred stuff, and a portion on some cuts here and there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you think that a modest increase is bad for business in the city of Regina, or is it something that it's a necessary evil? What's your thought on that? You've always sort of supported a modest tax increase,
yep.
But in light of what's gone on, we're looking for, in round numbers, around $12 million after everything is said and done. How do we come up with a modest tax increase to find?
Right.
And let's leave the previous 3.9% out of the equation. Let's deal with today, because the administration is saying a 2.5% increase in taxes.
That's modest.
Let's not talk to 3.9.
Yep.
Let's just talk.
Yep.
So is that a modest increase in your thinking, or is that low? Or
if I can just back up the question a little bit.
Yeah.
And I'd like to say this, and I hope I don't get myself into trouble by saying this, but I
probably
might.
will, but that's okay.
Wouldn't it be grand, or wouldn't it be great if every single government in the land actually operated the same way? Wouldn't it? I mean, we'd be in much, much better shape than where we are today with the federal debt as well as the provincial debt and other debts that we have as a country. Not to say that we're, when you look at the country as a whole and you compare us to the G7 and to other countries around the world, we're in very, very good shape. I don't mean to say that we're not. But I think that there are some that say that this organization, the City Hall, isn't run efficiently, and other claims about it. I've been around this for 25 years, and this is the most transparent form of government that there is, period. I mean, people can actually come here and sit here. You can actually get up and make a presentation. I mean, it's not like that at every level of government. Right. And so I think that generally speaking, people have the opportunity, like the lawn bowling people had tonight, to come and talk and be heard. So a lot of people say, well, you can't come to City Hall, you won't be heard. Well, that's not true. You will be heard. And I know they were heard tonight. I know that. To get back to your question, I'm sorry, I went off on a rant there. But to come back to your question, what we're talking about is a modest rate of increase. So, yes, it's modest.
It's modest. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. If there are no other questions, I have we'll go to Councillor Hawkins first, and I'll have my question after. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a few questions. First of all, with respect to the reserves, and the $9 million already in the general reserve fund, so let me call it the reserves.
Okay.
We heard from the city manager tonight that it's not good policy to fill permanent holes with temporary funding. When you suggest we look at that, I understand you're suggesting that that might help us in 2017, but are you aware in 2018 we'll be left with an even more acute problem because we did that?
But just to back it up, I understand you have $213 odd million in reserves. I get that. And there's the general fund reserve, and the cemetery reserve, and the golf course reserve, and the asphalt reserve, and the list goes on. There are many different reserves that we have. And it's not like the only revenue that comes into those reserves is from surpluses. That's not the case. The revenue that comes those reserves is budgeted each and every year. And I think I have the number here somewhere for this past year, and it wasn't an insignificant number. It'll take me too long to look it up. I think it was somewhere around $50 million. I could be wrong on that number. But anyways, it was not an insignificant amount of money. But what I've said, and what we've said historically, and I won't hide from that fact, is that we would argue that some of the surplus at the end of the year should go to help fund some of the one-time costs in different budget years. So we're not saying, and in fact it was very, very surprising in the survey results, that our members are very, very clear, I would say, that you should not be using to the reserves to fund the entire shortfall. That would be the worst thing to be doing, really, because you're just creating, what, a 20% rate increase next year? So that would not be a good thing to be doing. So I understand exactly what you're saying. I'm saying take a small portion of that surplus again from 2016 to help with some of the one-time costs.
Would you make that argument even though the level of our reserves as against our assets is 0.08%, which is lower than the average for most municipalities?
I've looked at that, and again, and I know we're kind of squabbling about semantics here in terms of what's a surplus and what's a reserve, but all we're saying is take a portion of the reserve. And the way we see of the surplus, is that you've ended the year with more money than expenditures. And take a portion of that and use it towards the next year.
You mentioned efficiencies. Would you say that your membership is aware of the fact that our city administration in the last budget passed has looked for $2.5 million in efficiencies, and with respect to the revised budget, is proposing an additional $500,000 worth of efficiencies? Are your members aware of that, and would they think that was a reasonable effort?
We are certainly aware of that and very supportive of that. And in fact, we work with your administration on all kinds of files. And I would say we have a great relationship, and we try to work together for one goal. And that goal is to make this community the best community that it can be. And contrary to what, some people would think in terms of, oh, that's the city and this is the chamber and we should just fight. No, we're trying to do the same thing, I would think, ultimately, which is create opportunities for our people and make this a great place for people to live and do business and all of the rest of the things that we're trying to do.
You mentioned how transparent the city was. Would your membership agree that the city is efficiently run?
There's no question about that. I mean, does every single member that I represent think that? No. But what I can tell you is there are some that say yes, they understand that. But let's look at some of the independent reports that are out there. And maybe I shouldn't be always using the City of Calgary report. It used to be the City of Edmonton report, and there's other reports that are out there that compares Regina to other municipalities across the land. And we do very, very well. And then when you look at, we have the second lowest property tax per capita in Canada. That tells me that this organization, this corporation, is run efficiently. Or else we would have the second highest, or something like that. Just to be fair.
Appreciate that answer, especially given the phone calls that other councillors and myself have had to listen to today. I appreciate the indication that people understand that the city is efficiently run. A couple more questions. You mentioned that there might be several of the proposed cuts that your membership might question or take a second look at, and indeed that's part of what's going on through this process. If we agree that some of those proposed cuts have to be set aside, we've got to make up the money somewhere. The $10.3 million figure is a fixed figure in the end. This is just an equation. Would your membership be all right if we went beyond the 2.5% mill rate increase as proposed?
I think that the membership would be, the lower the rate of increase possible is probably what we would support the most. But I think there is an appreciation that, I don't think there's too many people that are going to say, yeah, we're going to get to zero tonight. In fact, nobody has said that to me.
Give them my phone number.
And the reality is it's not possible. It's not possible to get to zero. I suppose you could look at doing some things that are pretty out there, but I think that most reasonable people would say that there's going to be some sort of increase here tonight. Is it going to be 2.5? Is it going to be probably not less, given what I'm hearing? Could it be 2.75? Could it be somewhere around there? Hopefully it'll be, he's not here, a modest rate of increase.
Thank you. One last question. I'm interested that you're going to see the government to talk to them about a number of issues, including the grants in lieu issue. The mayors, SUMA, have been to the government to talk to them about that issue. They reduced by 30% for a few towns, 10 I think, are capped at 30% their loss on the grants in lieu. And they've been very clear that that's as far as they're going. Do you have some arguments that you're going to make that might change their mind on what seems to be a rather fixed position on grants in lieu?
I think for this year, I'm not sure that there's going to be any change. And what we're hoping for is that, I've told that the door is still open for discussion about future years. And so we are going to lend our voice to saying, let's really look at this grants in lieu, and the impact that it's having in Regina, particularly Regina and Saskatoon, and see if there's some other solutions. But it's not just the grants in lieu, it's the other question that Councillor O'Donnell raised in terms of the collecting education property tax. That's another question that we need to have a discussion about. That's not normally the way we would see things go, but what we hope to do is at least lend our voice to say, we should really be looking at this, not so much for this year, because I think, with the utmost respect, that ship's probably sailed by now. And but for next year, I haven't given up hope yet.
Under the grants in lieu formula that was used, 107 rural municipalities lost no money at all. Saskatoon and Regina, despite being the growth centers of this economy, got hammered. Are you prepared to say anything to the government about the inequity of that kind of situation?
We're certainly going to have a discussion, and we'll discuss details related to grants in lieu with the government of Saskatchewan. There's no question about that.
Thank you very much.
So before I go to Councillor John, I want to follow up directly on this question of grants in lieu in your meeting with the province. Mr. Hopkins, you know that the government introduced legislation to eliminate grants in lieu, and eliminating the possibility of a legal challenge. So what are you looking for when you go in to talk to them about that? Is it something to replace the grants in lieu, or is it to reinstitute them?
Well, to tell you the truth, I don't know exactly what that form that will take. But I think essentially what this discussion is the City of Regina has lost $11 million. The City of Saskatoon is something around the same number. And we need to have a discussion about that. Is there some other solutions related to sort of that funding, whether it's called grants in lieu or called something else, remains to be seen. But the fact is our members have clearly stated that they're concerned about this, that they want us to have a discussion, and we certainly have no problem doing that.
Okay, appreciate that. There'll be discussions in the near future about revenue sharing and the PST distribution. Does your association have a position on that, or will you be raising that with the province when you meet with them?
That may be one of the solutions, really, is the municipal operating grant. I don't know at this point, but at least we'll have a discussion and open the door, and we'll see what comes as a result of those discussions. But I think it's encouraging that rather than us being here telling you, you go do that, we're saying, no, well, we'll be there too. We'll walk through the door with you. Not saying that we're going to get anything that you're not going to get, but at least we're going to walk through the door together.
I appreciate your efforts. Thank you for that. I'll turn to Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks. Oftentimes when people get together, they use terminology, and some of us understand the terminology because we've lived it. Others do not. A couple of questions. Do your members know what a grant in lieu is?
In the context of tonight's discussion, it's kind of a complicated sort of twists and turns. Like normally people would say it's grants in lieu of property taxes on X and Y building. Let's just say the SGI building and the SaskTel building. I almost said SaskPower, but that would confuse things. But in this case, it's grants in lieu in lieu of some of the agreements for distribution of power, distribution of natural gas. And so it's a little different. So it's a little different. So I would say that there's not as much awareness, and I think there would be some confusion. I think the report lays it out quite well, though.
Yeah, the report's good. Perhaps I'll leave this first question about grants in lieu out to your members. I'll bring back. There's some nice people here in the audience. They learned from us earlier about their tax bill. Let's all inquire now if they know what a grant in lieu is. What do you think the answer would be?
I would hope they would know, but it's hard to say. I would hope that most of the people here tonight, because it's A, it's in the report, B, we just talked about it.
Okay.
But again, it can be a confusing thing. Grants in lieu of taxes, what taxes? Okay. You think, well, property taxes. Well, yes and no. it's kind of a confusing issue, really.
We
But I
won't
think
be-
the people here
We won't be
understand.
testing them either,
No,
Councilor Dallas, so
not
just so you
not
know.
yet, but, so let's just take this another step farther. Let's survey your members and say, how is a municipality funded? Would they know?
I would think the overwhelming response would be through property tax. Now, the other thing I'll say about this budget is it's not a simple thing to read. You just can't pick that up overnight, read it, and then understand how the city of Regina is funded, because there are so many things coming from here and there and here and there, grants from other levels of government, funding through development, all kinds of different things. So I think that the short answer would be, people would say, yes, it's funded by property tax, but property tax is only a portion of the entire funding in the city of Regina. So again, I don't know, I might even fail that. No, I probably would pass the test, but a lot of people would say it's primarily property tax, but it's many other things.
Thanks. So again, I would say, if we ask the good people here how the city is funded, do you think that they would understand the importance of a government grant? Or would they not see that? Do they understand that property taxes is our biggie, when it's really at about 54%? So again, just to the general populace, if you don't mind
I
responding.
think the people here are here because they understand the importance of $11 million.
Okay.
I think that's fair, and the impact of $11 million in this community. I think that's fair.
Thanks. You made a couple of comments, and I appreciate the Mayor, again, speaking out that there is legislation that gets rid of grants in lieu, so I appreciate that. One of the things that weighs heavy on my mind is, beyond this year, it's the amount of money that we could be affected by next year, and that includes the fact that the provincial government is looking for additional savings next year. So my hope is that you will identify that in the future as well.
Yeah, we will certainly be going and having a discussion with the province of Saskatchewan and talking about, the survey results. In fact, some members already in the government already have the results of the survey, because we thought it was important that we get the information to them. And what we received back is the door's not closed.
Okay.
And I find that encouraging, and whether it will be grants in lieu as a result of the act, and they're not going to repeal the act, I don't know if that's going to happen, but at least there will be a discussion about the loss of $11 million.
Good.
Plus the other $2 million.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about the PST one, though.
I understand. I'll finish with this one thought. So are you aware of the negotiation as identified by, I think it was Councillor Hawkins, that we need to have with the province when it comes to the 1% of PST that we share? We share it with the north, we share it with the rurals, and we share it with all the urbans across the province.
Yep.
And the difference is that if you are on a per capita basis, in Regina or a city, you get about $200. But if you're in a rural jurisdiction, you get over $400. I hope that would be one of your talking points, please.
That will certainly be part of the discussion. Again, we find it encouraging that the door is open, and we intend to go through the door and talk about what our members say and the importance of continuing to grow this great community that we have, that we strongly believe in. And if I can, I just want to say this. And again, I'll get myself into trouble, but we'll see how this goes. The worst form of taxation is a capital tax. That's the tax that we're talking about. And it would be nice if we could have a discussion across the country about a different form. And I'm not going to say that I know the answer, because I don't. But it would be nice if we got to some different form of taxation in terms of how to fund municipalities across the country. Because I know that we're not the only municipality that's facing this challenge here in Saskatchewan. Yorkton's facing the challenge, even though they were one of the 9, I think, or 10, whatever that number was. They're facing some serious challenges. Saskatoon is facing some serious challenges up there. And so are we. But so are in other provinces, some of the same things are going on because of this capital tax that we call property tax that worked maybe 100 years ago, but doesn't work so good anymore.
Thanks.
I'd agree with you. We just need to open up the Cities Act and have the province agree to do that. That's key. Maybe you could raise that with them when you meet with them as well.
Is that a question? Yeah.
No, that's a statement. Thank you, Mr. Hopkins. You can return to the gallery. Thank you very much for answering all our questions.
Thank you.
Move on to our next delegation, James Holmes. Mr. Holmes, if you could identify yourself for the record, who you represent, and you have 5 minutes for your presentation as well.
Certainly. My name is Jim Holmes, and I represent myself here tonight. I'm going to try and go through this quickly because I know you've got a lot of delegations and a lot of decisions to make tonight. First, I just want to thank you for the hard work you're doing and doing the tough job that faces you. In general, I support your decision to preserve those reserves. You shouldn't be blackmailed by the provincial government. But I think it's important to remember the reserves are for catastrophic events like floods and other natural disasters. And I'd suggest to you the provincial budget is a disaster, although not a natural one. Besides the cuts that you're facing, I think you also need to keep in mind that there's probably 10,000 Regina citizens who are going to be facing a tax or an income cut of 3.5%. All those people depend on provincial government for their livelihood, in one directly or indirectly. And there are probably going to be thousands of jobs lost in this community, mostly through attrition, we hope, but partly through layoffs too. And so it might be prudent to use some of the reserves, and we care about that, some of the reserves for a short-term filling of a short-term hole. But the other thing we have to look at is the future of the city. And I was happy to hear the mayor say that everything is on the table. When we start that discussion, I think that we need to start with some principles. And I think the first principle is the job of the city is to protect its most vulnerable citizens from thieves in the night. The other thing I want to say is that when I was about 20, I went out sandbagging Wascana Creek. Well, that's not a contribution I can make to the community anymore, but it is our tradition that we all pitch in to help. And I think the second thing is, the guiding principle is that citizens should contribute based on their capability to help. We talk a lot about the punishing impact of this budget, but this budget also rewards certain segments of society, high-income earners and corporations with tax cuts. And this budget, in effect, this provincial budget, redistributes wealth from to high-income earners. So I would suggest to you that the city can meet some of its revenue needs by redistributing that income back again into the community. An increase, for example, in the top 25% of assessed residential values, roughly equal to the 1% income tax they got, would be one step towards reducing your revenue gap. Another one, we'd increase on the commercial property tax. Remember, there's a 1% over 2 years, a 1% in the corporate income tax. Now, we've heard that our corporate tax rates are among the lowest in the country, so we're not going to be terribly worried about competitiveness. A little different with industrial enterprises, but we would need some cooperation from the other cities in the Saskatoon, cities in Saskatchewan are undercutting each other's. Other thing we could do is start bringing back some of our taxpayers from their tax havens. Evraz Place, Brand Industries, Kramer Limited, Secundia Equipment, Degelman Industries, Shaw Pipe, the Co-op Refinery, and the Wascana Country Club are located in the rural municipality of Sherwood. Now, Sherwood has 929 residents. It's a pretty good industrial base. Given that most corporations want honest government, I would suggest that most of those people would be much happier being citizens of Regina. In general, despite what we heard earlier today, I think we should be moving towards a 50-50 split between our taxes coming from residential properties and 50% coming from commercial industrial properties. That's the Canadian average. It's lower on the prairies, but that's the Canadian average. Our current ratio is 63.4% is carried by residential properties and about 36% covered by commercial industrials. We've talked a lot, and I know the budget meets, we're not going to talk much more about this, but the question of recouping those costs on growth and development, I think that's key.
Mr. Holmes, you have 1 minute.
Okay, and as we move forward, we need to take a look at the regressive effect of utility taxes. Particularly the water and wastewater fees work as a regressive flat tax, and we should move to more a system that would equalize that and not be using that to underwrite city revenues and thereby reducing property tax, which is a lousy tax but not as bad as a utility fee. Okay. So again, just in conclusion, I think there's no way we're going to avoid the impact of this budget, but I think it is our duty of all of us to try and reduce as much as we can the impact on our most vulnerable citizens and to have the strong make their contribution.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Other questions? Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. I have a couple of questions about your proposals here. You mentioned the tax havens and the RM of Sherwood. Could you explore that a little bit more and tell me how might one actually go about ending these tax havens and bringing those centers back into Regina?
Well, you might be better to address that to the city solicitor, but quickly, the question of the tax havens was brought to my attention by a former member of City Council and said that Regina was unusual in the fact that so many large industries existed outside the civic borders. He said Saskatoon is nowhere near like that kind of arrangement. For example, you can see the recent brand industries located in Saskatoon's industrial park. So that's the key. The city has always grown by taking chunks out of the RM Sherwood. I mean, originally it was basically the train station. So it's growing that time. There is a process. It requires us to compensate the rural municipality for some of their lost tax revenues. But it's important. Those are important parts of our economy. They turn up in the budget as being parts of Regina's economy, and yet they're outside the jurisdiction of the City Council. So I think that's one thing we take a serious look at, is bringing those back in so that they're part of this community and they share in the benefits, but also in the pain of this community.
Thank you. Toying with some language in my head, so we'll be in touch. The second question I have is about the residential-commercial ratio, and we had a discussion earlier, obviously, this evening. We also heard that Regina currently enjoys a very low commercial tax rate relative to other jurisdictions. What do you anticipate to be the effects of changing that ratio and bringing it to the 50-50?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing is I think it needs to be done carefully. There's some talk about bringing in tax increases slowly and tax decreases slowly. And I think it's important that we not disrupt the commercial and industrial part of the city. But the other part is I think we do need to recognize is that the rates here, and generally in prairie cities, here, Saskatoon, Winnipeg, the amount coming from commercial industrial is very low percentage of the tax revenue. Although in cities, the general ratio is about 75% of the assessed property values are in residential and about 25% in commercial. So that's pretty standard across the country, but what that ratio is very different. So it had to be done carefully. I think it's different for commercial than industrial. Commercial enterprises are here because there's a market. We will be selling them, our citizens, as their consumers. Industrial, they need the citizens, they need the workers, they need the infrastructure, but I think it's a little tougher, a little more competitive market. So I don't want to suggest it's easy. It has to be done with a great deal of sophistication, but I think it's something we need to work on.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Other questions? Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Holmes, you fairly mentioned that a large number of workers in the province are facing the possibility of a 3.5% wage cut. I just want to check to make sure that you're aware, and the membership that you deal with are aware, that the mayor and the city councillors of Regina, whose wages are tied to elected officials provincially, will also be taking a 3.5% wage cut.
Sorry, I missed the last part of that question.
The mayor and the city councillors will also be taking a 3.5% wage cut.
I guess I would say that I admire your principled stand, your solidarity. I know I've had some differences with you in the past, but I don't think you get paid enough for the work you do. So I'm not very happy to hear that. I don't think
say that again, please.
I don't think you get paid enough for the work you do. It's a tough job.
I thought I heard you say that.
I've seen you, okay, and maybe some days I've been part of your tough job. I think we undervalue the contribution of public employees. That's what I spent my working life trying to deal with. But I also think we even worse undervalue the contributions of elected officials, and I think that's not healthy. But I guess I salute any act of solidarity.
I appreciate your very civically minded comment. Thank you.
Mr. Holmes, I have a question for you, and just for clarity, because I've only read your report tonight, so I want to make sure I understand this.
I only wrote this morning, so you're forgiven.
Fair enough. So you mentioned, and I don't want to cherry pick here too much, you say that the budget, I think you mean the provincial budget here, rewards high-income earners and corporations with tax cuts. And then you seem to say that the city should meet, or sort of address that issue. Are you saying that we should use our budget to address what you believe are inequities in the provincial budget?
Well, I think the inequities in the provincial budget are obvious. I guess what I am saying is that in a time of crisis, and I think we are facing one, then the question is every citizen should be making a contribution to helping to resolve that. When I was 20, I had a fairly strong back, but no money, so I went and threw sandbags for a night, okay? Now I couldn't possibly do that, but I have a little more money than I did when I was 20. And so it makes sense that people who have more room, more financial ability, should contribute to trying to offset that. And in this province, high income earners, I heard a figure that basically the income tax cuts are going to balance out the PST increases for high income earners, because typically at higher income you don't consume as much, quite frankly, or you have more control, or you have more choices about your consumption. So the principle, I guess, is that some people are getting a break, and some of that break should go to help those who are being hurt.
But, okay, not to be argumentative, because it sounds like you're saying we as a city order of government should be involved in redistribution of income. But you're not really saying that, are you?
Well, I think you do redistribute general wealth in a whole lot of ways by providing us with very good services, and you charge us taxes for those. Roughly, most of the taxes we paid are based on the value of our property, which is a very, very rough estimate of our wealth, right? I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But it's the best vehicle you have that's at least moderately progressive or moderately related to income. Things like utility rates are really not. I mean, we all need water. Okay, we don't all need a McMansion, but we all need about the same amount of water each day.
Good. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. That's helpful. Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery, and we'll go on to our next delegation. Marilyn Pollock. Good evening, Ms. Pollock. If you could identify yourself for the record, who you represent, you have 5 minutes for your presentation. And there may be questions afterwards.
Good evening, Your Worship, Councillors. I'm Marilyn Pollock. I'm President and representing the Condominium Institute of the South Saskatchewan chapter. Unfortunately, we just learned of the city's intention to eliminate the waste disposal rebate for owner-occupied condos, specifically condos that do not receive city waste pickup service. As a result, our presentation to you tonight will be brief, I promise, but we wish to provide some information we hope you will consider when making your decision regarding this rebate elimination. The Administration and Council in 2002 initiated the program following discussion with CCI South Saskatchewan and committed to consult again if changes were planned. We are disappointed that no consultation was requested in this budget deliberation. Condos are now taxed at the same rate as a home residence, which is an increase of 10% this year. The difference is the condo owner do not own the property, and they do not get all the same municipal services. The property valuation is a provincial decision, responsibility, whatever. We know that, but we also know that a municipality can adjust to make the property assessment at least fair. That is what we are looking for. Equality between types of residents in Regina. Why should condo owners pay more to offset the budget shortfall than what is being asked of all Regina residents? It is understood that if Regina goes to I'll call it a service pay tax assessment for municipal services, that there will be options to consider how taxation on condos versus homes can be realized while still supporting municipal services equitably. There are various models available, and I'm sure that you've all looked at some different times from other major centers. We appreciate the difficulty the city is facing with transfer payments being cut by the province as well as escalating costs. But please recognize that condos are already facing the additional 10% increase in valuation before the mill rate is applied. These taxes include waste pickup, even though they cannot get this service, and they also then must hire a private firm to do their garbage pickup. $40 a year rebate may not seem to be a significant number, but adding up all the increases, condo owners will be impacted, many of whom have chosen to live in a condo. It is the only way they can afford to have their own home. We will be seeking future opportunities to meet with city administration and councillors to discuss options that could be considered in future to return to some equity in taxation for condominiums. On behalf of well over 6,000 Regina condominium owners, thank you for your time. I hope you're now aware that we exist as an organization, and we would like the opportunity to work with you in the future.
Thank you, Ms. Pollock, for your presentation. There may be questions of you.
Thank
You made
you.
yourself very clear. Thank you very much. Move on to our next delegation, Kelly Mentenko. If you could identify yourself for the record, who you represent, you as well have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions afterwards.
Thank you. My name is Kelly Mentenko. I'm just representing myself as a citizen, as also a father of a son who's participated in lawn bowling most of his life. So, again, thank you for having me here tonight. Members of council, His Worship the Mayor, and all in attendance, thank you for allowing me to speak to council today. I am here to support the continued operation of the lawn bowling club for the city of Regina. I was made aware of a report from administration to council only this past weekend on the recommendation of closing the only lawn bowling club in Regina. I feel this is extremely short-sighted of administration and council to totally close the club with little to no notice, consultation, or communication. I've reviewed the current recreation master plan on the City of Regina website. In it, it suggests getting into discussions for the city to get out of the lawn bowling game. It also states that administration should start discussions with the club to slowly start taking it over. I don't see anywhere in this report where it states that it needs to be closed. Is the administration and council not following the recreation master plan? Simply closing the facility is not the answer. Where will most of those members, corporate groups, volunteers, youth, and members of the general public go to lawn bowl? There is no other facility in Regina. It is not as simple as closing a golf course, as there are many golf courses in the area and around Regina. I ask council today to delay closing this facility for 2017 and to review it as per your recreation master plan with the group. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Mr. Mentenko, is there any questions of the delegation? Councillor Flagel.
Thank you. Thank you for coming forward. You speak of the Lawn Bowling Association, but you say you have your son or daughter is involved?
My son has been lawn bowling most of his life, yes.
How old is he?
He's right here. He's 21?
21? Okay. I was just wondering, because you said when you say youth, he's actually an adult. Just so you know, you're an adult.
I know.
So, but I'm wondering, how long has he been involved?
Age-wise, he started what age? 12, 13.
Okay. So, and it's been a great experience, obviously, because he's still doing it, right?
He has, and he's had the opportunity to go to provincial events. He's had the opportunity to go to national events as well. And, you know, he may have not been successful, but at the end of the day, it means more to him than that in terms of getting to know other people from other areas, etc.
So when he was a youth or as his young adult, does the club get funding from SaSport and different organizations, SAS lotteries, to help in expenses and travel and nationals, Canadians, does they get support from that?
Well, I can speak from, as a father, right,
Yeah.
not from the club, but as a father, I do know in certain circumstances, they do provide some funding, not total funding, to attend certain events or tournaments, and that is to encourage, to allow, those that maybe can't afford the full amount to going to another city or, a town, they have to stay overnight, et cetera. So some of that is able to offset some of the costs, yes.
So if I could, through you, Mr. Mayor, your son, he's considered an adult, I guess, in the world. So he'd pay, what, $165 a year fee?
Yes, he would be paying $165, yes.
What would, if the club came back to you and said, look, we got to charge $250, I'm just picking a number, would you be okay with that for the year? $250 for the year.
Well, since he's an adult, I hope that he could pay for it himself now. But I think the thing is, at the end of the day, is we still need to make it affordable. It is a very good activity for youth all the way to adults.
Sure.
We don't want to price it out of the range of somebody just having a good time, right?
But that's my question. Would $250 be out of the range for an adult? A youth, I agree, but an adult?
I think he answered the question, Councilor. Honestly, he did. So you need to ask it twice.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of individually, the families would have to think about that.
You didn't want to price yourself out.
For my opinion, it's okay, but it depends.
Okay. As you as a parent and I'm assuming spouse, it's something. Would you get involved in it?
I have bowled. I haven't bowled with them at all. I'm more of a spectator, and my family is more of a spectator. And the only reason we were able to get into it is because our son was so active in it and wanted to get into it. So it's become more of a family affair, going to different tournaments and stuff like that. And there was a large contingency here, and we've got to know a lot of the members over the time. So it's not just drop your your kid off to the bomb bowls. It is really a family event.
It becomes an event, and when you get a little older, you're going to join then, right?
Well, hopefully.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Flagel. Other speakers or questions of the delegation? Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery.
Thank you.
Our next delegation is Richmond Graham, John Aston, and Derek Thew, Airport Authority. Good evening, gentlemen. If you could identify yourself for the record, who you represent, you have 5 minutes for your presentation as well.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of Regina City Council. I'd like to introduce Mr. John Ashton on my right, Director of Planning and Development, and Mr. Derek Toohey, CFO, on my left, and myself, Richmond Graham, President and CEO of the Regina Airport Authority. I'll refer to us as the RAA going forward. I trust that Council recognizes that the authority learned on Friday of the proposal to remove the exemption of the property tax to the Regina International Airport lands without any consultation with the Regina Airport Authority. And as such, we come with limited understanding of the thoughts of the city. Now, we do know that the city would appreciate the undesirable element of surprise, so please bear with us. However, we also recognize that the proposal before Council is not adequately informed, and any decision to remove exemptions in turn will increase costs to airlines and passengers flying to and from Regina and hamper future service development and growth. We ask Council to instruct administration to work earnestly with the RAA and find ways to avoid this increase in property taxes or loss exemptions to the RAA. Allowing the proposal to proceed will put future transborder Regina USA destination flights at risk and may decrease service quality to and from Regina and from its current carriers. Downloading these costs to the airport will not serve anyone's interests. The RAA has been working with administration over the course of 2016 and 17 to determine a path forward on property tax and specifically on the exemption review being done by administration. For Council's consideration for the 2018 taxation year, a unilateral decision by the city to proceed in 2017 with exemption removal for the RAA runs counter to all discussions with the city thus far. The Regina Airport Authority assumed the operational management of the airport from Transport Canada in 1999, We're a non-share capital, not-for-profit corporation with an independent board of directors nominated from the region. The RAA receives no funding at all from any level of government, federal, provincial, or municipal. We compete with airports in Saskatoon, Winnipeg, Calgary, Minot, and Williston, amongst many others. Fees paid by airlines are heavily subsidized by profits from non-aeronautical revenue. Capital growth of facilities is also funded from these profits. And council should be aware that a $5 million operating surplus in 2015 from these funds are destined under airport improvement fee rules to airport capital. In addition to all, the business of and on the airport enables over $800 million in direct and indirect GDP for Regina and region. I will now pass the floor over to my colleague, John Ashton.
Thank you. Good evening. I just wanted to elaborate on a couple of points. The services rendered on airport. The Regina Airport Authority provides nearly all the municipal services on airport lands, with very little service being provided by the City of Regina. Full taxation is collected on all the groundside lots, so that's all of the hangars and buildings, and also on the Airport Authority's groundside lands. Essentially, the RAA pays full tax and receives fewer services than other properties. This does not represent an equitable and fair partnership arrangement and needs to be included in any discussion of taxation on airport going forward. The budget review in the council package, the city review of RAA finances was cursory and uninformed. The RAA is due to expand the air terminal facilities at YQR, and in preparation for that must place cash in reserve. A simple review of the bottom line numbers doesn't well inform these discussions. In my opinion, the tax policy should not be set by rationale in the report before you, such as, and I quote, the RAA appears to have the capacity to
You have
raise
1
the
minute to
funds
go in your presentation.
to pay the municipal portion of the property tax increase. The RAA was not on the annual exemption bylaw for tax relief purposes, but rather as a mechanism to administer and adjust property taxation to approximate the grants and lieu taxes that would have been paid had the federal government continued to manage and operate the airport. Another quick point, the tax calculation appears to be made on assessed values that may be out of date, as the assessments on the airside parcel have become less reliable over time. In closing, we ask that City Council not proceed with the presented recommendation and direct City Administration to work with the Regina Airport Authority to identify a service agreement which would reflect the uniqueness of the airport and the municipal services it requires. Thanks for your consideration, and we're pleased to respond to any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. You're right on time. Thank you very much for your presentation. Are there questions of the delegation? Any questions at all? Councillor Stevens?
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for the explanation here. Just imagine I'm the average traveling member of the public. I'm going on holidays. Tell me how the ending of this exemption would affect me and people coming into Regina as tourists, travelers.
Well, on our operating expenditures, we just recovered just more than just $100,000 to a few $100,000 over our expenses in any given year as a not-for-profit. So you would see that the price of an airline ticket would increase quite likely, or you may see that the yield, the airlines may recognize that the yield per seat that they have isn't high enough, and they reduce the frequency of flights to and from Regina or remove an aircraft altogether.
I know this is difficult considering airline economics, but is there an estimated amount that a seat might cost or the ticket increase might cost as a result of this?
That's very difficult to say, in part because the airlines have a choice. They can pick up their airplane and move it anywhere in the country or anywhere in the world for that matter. We've seen it happen before. And there is always the possibility that they may just be able to make more money elsewhere and remove it because the yield is lower. So even if the increase was higher, they might just say, "I'm going to move. I'm going to take that airplane somewhere else."
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Your Worship. Gentlemen, thanks for coming out tonight. My question is, you talked about some of the services or lack of services that you receive from the city. Could you go into maybe a little bit of depth about what services, municipal services that you do receive?
Sure. A quick list of them is all of the sewer and water infrastructure on airport is airport-owned, maintained, and operated. So things like fire hydrants and manholes and all that stuff is maintained by the airport authority only. Snow removal on roads on airport, road maintenance, asphalt repairs, waste and recycling removal, public transit's kind of a big one. We don't have any. Planning and development services on airport, permitting services, development permits, building permits. That's a new function that the airport is taking on. The city is no longer doing. Parking enforcement and a handful of others, I guess, but those are the main ones.
So Mr. Aston has reflected on that which we provide as an airport to those on airport that are paying full municipal and education taxes, and to those on the airside development. We have a calculation that's agreed to with the city at 89 cents per passenger. But the services that are provided by the city are the provision of services associated with police services and fire. We also have our own fire department.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Thanks.
Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Gentlemen, how many passengers on planes come in and go out of the Regina Airport each year?
1.26 million approximately.
So my math isn't very good at this hour of the night, but I think we're talking about, what, $350,000 here, the exemption?
It's unclear to us just what the calculation would be. There was a $270-some thousand estimate, but we find it quite questionable at this point. So it may be more, yes.
So for the sake of argument, whether it's 270,000 or 300,000, if I divide that number into what did you say, 1.2 million passengers a year, is that really, and you're able to download it onto them, is that really an amount that's going to discourage air travel?
Well, any increases to fees can be a discouragement to air travel, and we're very aware of that, and we would not want to prompt an increase to a landing fees increase that led us to be out of competition with Saskatoon or any of the airports surrounding us, including municipal-funded airports like Minot and Williston.
Are there any, you raise an interesting point, are there any other airports that get property tax exemptions that you know of? What about Saskatoon, Regina, Winnipeg, Calgary, Toronto?
Most airports have the same similar mechanism that we do, which is back when Transport Canada operated airports prior to 1999, in our case 1992, and some of the other airports' cases in 1999, in Saskatoon's case, that the grant in lieu of taxes that was being paid by the federal government to the municipality was approximated. As the assessment then was revised, a fee had to be associated with that, and then the exemption began to apply and increase over time. So yes, to your question directly, many other airports have a very similar situation. Saskatoon's in a 5-year agreement. Theirs comes up in 2018, I believe.
And generally, those exemptions going up or down through time?
I think, do you recall?
Well, they would go up. Airports are very capital intensive in nature and very costly to build. So yes, those exemptions do go up dramatically over time.
And I'm surprised by that, by the way. One final question. I think you understand the problem that we have as a city. $10.3 million been taken out of our budget, or numbers close to that. We've heard tonight, and our administration has proposed a series of tax increases and an exemption in your case gone, and various grants going, and everybody is before us has said, not us. And any suggestions on what we might do to fill this hole?
Well, thank you. I would say that one thing that we've had is a great relationship with the administration. And we'd like to continue on discussions on many matters to see how the services at the airport can be can be uniquely recognized and paid for, and the needed services on an ongoing basis can be increased where possible. So I think there's an opportunity, but I wouldn't want to preclude discussions with administration, presuming one thing or another. There's many topics of discussion, from future development in and around the airport to discussions on the services that we get.
Can you give me a specific example of what you mean?
Oh, well, we certainly have the situation where we're taking care of all of our own airport. We fix our own roads, we maintain our roads, we clear our roads, we collect our garbage, we do a great many things that are offered by all, and we maintain our underground utilities. Maybe there's portions of those that might be available to us. Or services like additional connecting our pedway and walkway and bicycle across the bridge to the Louvain. And then while the city has installed crosswalks, they've not activated them, and we'd like to make the whole airport experience safe. So we'd like to explore a great many options amongst services connecting to the airport.
Sir, it's late at night, and I may be slower than I should be. You're not suggesting that those expenses be downloaded onto the city, are you?
No, what I'm saying is I think the city has a responsibility to connect their airport to their city, and we would like to continue those discussions to see that happens, and see where there's opportunities for if there's going to be an increase, if there is going to be an increase in the net taxes that we pay on these federal lands to the airport, from the airport to the city, that we get some value from that.
Do you get some value from the service of the city already?
So the city offers values of connection in water and sewer and drainage, and yes, we get some value from that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and welcome, gentlemen. And this is the right time of night for me, so I'm primed to go. So
hold it back, Councillor Flavel. Just take it easy. One question at a time, okay?
This is just the right time of the night. I'm ready to go. So let me ask you this: if we're talking fees and we're talking assessments and everything, so was it fees that caused airlines, the 3 airlines, there was 3 in the last while, to leave the city, or what caused that to happen? Was it the fees that were charged? Because if that's the case, then maybe we need to relook at what we're doing, because if you're saying we're going to take money away, which is going to increase your fees, give me an explanation as to why those 3 airlines left, or a generic one.
In each case, there's been 2 airlines, United, that flew to Chicago and Denver.
Oh, sorry.
They left in 2015, late 2014, early 2015.
Yeah.
Those 2 locations left. And then Delta left last summer. The issues surrounding those were primarily due to the size of the airplane that needs to service the location, okay, and the attractiveness of the destination, which is the rationale for bringing in U.S. paying customers that pay in U.S. dollars into Regina. There's more that fly to Saskatoon. Saskatoon is more attractive to many U.S. customers than Regina is, as an example. So in Delta's case, it was the low Canada-U.S. dollar, coupled with the question of why should someone fly to Regina, whereas Saskatoon had a better value proposition because they could take hunters and fishers to the north.
Okay.
And we're working on that, Councillor, to make the connections out of this airport to the north stronger. That'll take some time, but
that was going to be one of my next questions. Is if the money was to be left, would it be something utilized to enhance airlines to come back? Because it's obviously been a big hit to the city not to have those connections into the U.S.
I agree, absolutely.
But what kind of work can we look at if this exemption changed and we didn't take it away? What would sort of be a carrot for the airlines? This is a small amount of money in an airline world, But what kind of carrot would this sort of help you guys dangle to get a U.S. airline back in here?
Yeah, very good. I think there's really two parts. We see that the Regina advantage that is spoken about by Economic Development Regina is something that can be splashy and sell the concept of why people should come to this great city. We're looking at how we connect beyond, and we're working with local airlines. I'd be very clear, the loss of Executive Air provided a tremendous opportunity for advancing those discussions sooner rather than later. So we're in some very detailed discussions now. So in short, we're heading down that path, and we are investing heavily into that this very year, and those monies would be well spent.
Thank you. Through you, are we, in the mind of our RAA, are we considered a supplier to you or a partner?
I'd characterize it clearly as a partner.
Okay, good.
Yes.
That's a good answer. So, but what I'm wondering about is you've had meetings with administration, but I'm not sure when the last time we as council sat down with your board, and I'm not looking for a supper by any stretch because we do enough of that, but if a meeting between council and your board to tell us what's going on with the money we provide, the services we provide, other than a short 5-minute blurb, if we could have that as something.
Is that a question,
Yeah,
Councillor
I'm
Flego?
asking, when do you think we might be able to, in the next couple of 3 months, get together and have a discussion, regardless of what happens on this particular item?
Well, thank you, Councillor. And I can say that, number one, we don't receive a dime for any level of government, including from the city to the airport. We don't receive any money whatsoever.
Right.
The money that we make on our own as a private corporation, a not-for-profit, we spend wisely. And the time in which to do that, the one that's upcoming is at the nominators meeting on Wednesday of this week, and of course to our annual meeting that's also Wednesday morning of this week at the RCMP Heritage Museum.
Okay, but down the road, is there a chance we can get together as a council and board?
I would put it to the board and leave it for them to return
Thanks.
to you on that.
Thank you, Councillor Flego. I believe Councillor Bryce may have a question. Councillor Bryce?
Thank you. I do have a question. So, just using the rationale that that the airport authority is using. First of all, are you saying that you've never had use for our police service?
Oh, quite the contrary, Councillor. We certainly have had use for our police service, and we welcome them at the Regina International Airport on a frequent basis. In these times of security and safety in public areas like airports around the world, we encourage them to come often and show their presence, park their cruisers outside, and walk the halls. That's just to have a presence where possible, and so they do a great service to us in that regard. In addition, they respond, as does your fire department, to emergencies that we have from time to time. So we certainly embrace the services that they provided.
So those are a couple of the services that you use from the city. What about the roads to and from the airport? Do those get used by anybody going to the airport?
There is an old bridge just off the Louvain that connects to our airport that, as I think you well know, it connects to our airport roads as well, yes?
Okay. Also the rationale you're using, so if I don't use a school in Regina, does that mean I shouldn't pay the school portion of the property tax or the library, for example?
The RAA is not, we didn't come prepared to speak to not paying education taxes as they are passed on to the provinces, we understand. We're here to talk about the municipal tax exemption.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Other questions? Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery.
Thank you all.
I believe that Michelle Benro Carney is not here. Just want to confirm that, because she has it listed here as a delegation. She's not here. So for members of council, if you could provide me with a motion to accept her report.
I'll accept those. She was unable to make it.
Okay, just for a moment there. We've also got the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, which is a communication. Suzanne and Robin Lenvoy and the Public Library are all communications.
I'll take those all under advisement that they're inside.
Okay, and the seconder for that, please. Councilor Ferndura, all those in favor? Opposed, carried. I do want to note, though, that with the Regina Public Library, I know the library representative is here as well, is recommending a zero increase on their budget. That will fold into our discussions as we go forward. So thank you for that communication. And I don't think, unless there's any questions of members of council for the library, we could bring the library director down if we needed to. We're okay? Okay. Thank you. So we'll move into our next report. This is the annual property tax exemption. We do have one delegation, and that's Chad Novak. Mr. Novak, once again, for the record, if you could identify yourself, who you represent, you have 5 minutes for your presentation.
Thank you. That was one of the questions I was having, was if I was going to be before the big discussion or not. So just 1 second for water. Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, my name is Chad Novak, and you know who I am. Talking about the boundary alteration property tax exemptions. I talked about this last year. It's word for word almost the same thing I said last year, so you guys, well, some of you will be aware, some of you are new, so. Where should I start here? I feel strongly that the overall concept of tax exemptions for properties brought into city boundaries is fair to an extent, as it can be quite a jump in property taxes going from the RM to a city the size of Regina. With that said, the question becomes just how much is fair, for how long, and, most importantly, should it make a difference if the property owner did not want to be annexed versus those that had explicitly requested to be annexed? Further, considering the fact that you are also considering raising everyone else's taxes even further in the revised 2017 budget, this is only a further slap in the face to the rest of Regina residents. Now, based on my research, the general consensus is that the exemption amount and the time contained within this framework is more than fair. Where the amount and length of exemption is dependent upon the anticipated timeline of when the affected lands may be used for city purposes rather than RM purposes. However, there is a serious concern amongst taxpayers regarding property owners that specifically requested to be annexed versus those that are annexed against their wishes, as well as differentiating between commercial and residential property owners. Also, and I can't stress this enough, the ability to pay should be a major factor. Should I pause, sir?
Go ahead. Continue on.
I want to make sure you're paying attention.
I have your report in front of us. Continue on.
I'll remember that. Now, let me get back to where I was. The ability to pay should be a major factor, and like is policy for other city services, it is felt that any affected property owner should have to demonstrate that the additional property taxes will cause, quote-unquote, unreasonable financial hardship as a result of annexation. And in fact, this clause was included within this very policy, as you see in Appendix A. We would be remiss to not mention the fact that, according to real estate experts, the mere act of annexation immediately increases the affected property values because of the fact that they are now within city jurisdiction and have access to city services. Keeping this in mind, it is a fact that any major property owner east of Tara Road very quickly flipped some of their affected lands to the province for the Regina bypass and to the city for the Pacer Ballpark relocation for upwards of 10 times the value immediately prior to annexation. This was with absolutely no improvement to the lands by that property owner. Further, on the concept of unreasonable financial hardship, it seems only reasonable that a homeowner who has lived in the island for decades should be considered more so for relief than the additional from the additional property taxes versus, say, a giant multi-million-dollar corporation who explicitly requested to be annexed into the city for quote-unquote undisclosed reasons. who ought to have anticipated and budgeted for additional property taxes. Now, a reasonable person would argue that they most certainly have the ability to afford the higher taxes, even before taking into account the financial benefits that is realized because of that annexation. As you can see in Appendix B, one of these companies publicly traded AGT Foods on East Primrose Drive, which is amongst a group of companies associated with Alliance Pulse Processors, Long Investment Inc., and NutriSun Foods, is set to receive over $80,000 in property tax exemption alone. Pardon me, that's from last year, so it may be different this year. When factored
to go in your presentation.
When factored over the anticipated 15-year lifespan of this exemption, barring any further extensions, that translates to over $1.2 million in lost property taxes to the City of Regina and, in turn, its residents. Now, for a company with annual revenues nearing $2 billion, as outlined in Appendix C, I would hardly consider them to have realized any unreasonable financial hardship due to annexation. Finally, it is also important to note that the aforementioned properties were never previously included in any long-term 25-year official community plans prior to 2013. The question that a reasonable person would have to ask: why then were these lands annexed, and why did we not stick to the 25-year plans as previously designed up to 2011? Thank you for your time this evening, and I will gladly answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you for your presentation. Other questions? Apparently there are none. Thank you very much. And move on to consideration of CM 14-4, boundary alteration, 2017 property tax exemptions. I don't know if the administration may have any comments on this report prior to us considering it. I know we have looked at this report before. Any comments by the administration? Ms. Howlick?
Through you, Your Worship. As the report indicates, this is coming before Council due to the boundary alteration that was done some time ago in 2013. The properties that are in question have different varying factors that go against them, such as when they're allowed to be developed and how they fit into our growth plan, and that's how the principles were put forth in the report, in the original report that went to Council. So a lot of these properties actually do not have water and sewer services that go to their property and those types of things, and they will get that as the development takes place. So there is mitigation measures that are outlined in the report that if properties do start to develop, then the exemption would be taken off the property. So it is outlined in the report, and I can answer any questions that Council may have.
Okay, I'll need a motion to accept the recommendations first. Councillor Hawkins?
Your Worship, I'll move that motion.
Seconder, please. Councillor O'Donnell. I have a question, though. Is there something materially changed in this? Because we have considered this, when we actually annexed the lands, we actually decided in this framework to move this way. Is there something that's changed that we'd have to bring it back again? Ms. Howlick?
Through you, Your Worship, we have to bring the forwards for the exemptions because it's part of the Act that we have to bring forward for Council's approvals.
Okay. Every year? Ms. Howlick, every year?
Through Your Worship, yes, I believe it is every year. I'll ask Mr. Barr too.
Mr. Barr?
Through Your Worship, the way the exemptions are calculated, the numbers would change each year as the reassessments has an impact on it. So
that makes
the agreement
sense.
needs to be done on an annual basis to reflect the changes in the assessments.
Fair enough. That makes sense. Discussion on the report. Councillor O'Donnell.
Just a couple of thoughts. So I remember this vividly. And at the time that we looked at this overall acquiring of land for the city, I'm not using the word annexation because it's called boundary alteration. That was an agreed upon term at that time. But there was a ripple effect. But let me go back first. One, there was heated debate and heated discussion over changing boundaries at that time. Okay? Not only in the city of Regina, but in a number of places in the province. Separate from what happened on the floor of council, SUMA and SARM sat down and said, this is not working. I happened to be the person on the SUMA board who sat at that table. And we provided what was called a principled approach for how boundary alteration could occur in every jurisdiction in the province. I'm going to tell you right now, what used to be litigation is not litigation anymore. What used to be a really difficult, hurtful situation is now being resolved because people have bought into the principles and bought into many of the things that sit before you today. I'll be endorsing this.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Other speakers? You'll be closing debate, Councillor Hawkins, so if no one other speaks, I'd ask Councillor Stevens to take the chair, please.
Worship?
So I want to add a bit of a conversation to this, too, because we did the boundary alterations, as Councillor O'Donnell spoke of, but we did something else as well. We actually looked at the condition of each parcel of land and said, there are some parcels that are actually developed along Victoria Avenue, as an example, and we should treat them differently because, frankly, they are already developed, and they already have services, and we will be more imminently developing them. We looked at other pieces of land beyond the 300,000 population. And we felt that there's no imminent need for us to be taxing them at a city rate, nor should they do that because they will not be receiving city services for quite some time. We had lots of delegations come in and talk about what was fair and reasonable. And at the end of the discussion, I think everyone sort of felt whether they want to be in the city or not, they were treated fairly. Because someone who owns farmland does not expect to be developed for 30, 40 years. Why would we ask them to pay city taxes right away? That would be unfair. So the report is an excellent example of meeting in a pragmatic way the development, imminent or not, of residents who have been brought into our city limits. So this is a very unique circumstance, I think, in how we've dealt with this. And I thank the administration for doing that. The previous council endorsed that. And as we heard, we bring it back every year because there are changes in valuations and how taxes go forward. But this is a very, very good way to deal with those who are going to be taxed as city property because of the services and those who won't be for quite some time. Councillor Hawkins to close debate, or Councillor Stevens first, I guess. Councillor Stevens.
I was wondering perhaps you could give me a little snapshot of the land. Is it mostly just it's agricultural land, first off? And secondly, what would they be paying if they were still in the RM of Sherwood or in a rural municipality generally?
Ms. Harlock?
Through your worship, I'll start and then I'll pass it over to Mr. Barr. So the lands are primarily urban holding lands that have come in, and as the mayor indicated, we have different, when we looked at it, imminent and then long-term lands, and that's why the exemptions were set up the way they were. And so primarily, those are the two classifications of it. The lands that we did bring in did take us over further than our 300,000 population projections, and that was another reason why we looked at doing this. But I might ask Mr. Barr to go forward to explain how the calculations are brought about with respect to how we set the base from what they would have paid with RM and how we apply that.
Mr. Barr?
Through your worship, the calculation was originally to equal what the RM taxes would be on the first year, and it moves towards the city taxes as it's developed. And as Ms. Harlock pointed out, the majority of the land is farmed and isn't in the development plans in the near future. Most of it is longer term for the 25-year growth plan.
Okay. So considering what we're dealing with here in terms of budgetary crisis or pinch, however you want to frame this, what is the risk if we abandon this exemption and we decide that we're going to tax them at the current market rate? Why would we not go down that road, considering we're looking for revenue here?
Ms. Harlock?
Through your worship, at the end of the day, it is council's decision, but this was part of the principles that we put forward during the the boundary alteration process. The city's share of the revenues is approximately, as the report says, about 200,000. So when we went and had those discussions, it was a goodwill gesture because these were some significant concerns to those residents that were coming into the city. with respect to how much their taxes were going to go up and their development potential, et cetera. Because at this point, they do not receive full city services. Most of these lands are not hooked up to our water, our sewage, our drainage system. They're obviously connected to our transportation system, and we are receiving some form of tax for compensation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Young?
Thank you, Your Worship. So also, these lands are not able to be developed at this point because they're outside the 300,000 boundary. Is that correct as well?
Through you, Your Worship, a portion of them are outside of the 300. As we said, there's different types of development that are imminent, such as the commercial. That's why there's a phase-in for 5 years. But then the residential is broken into, and then within our 300, we also have a phasing plan within those lands.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Other speakers before Councillor Hawkins closes debate? Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have no substantive points to add. I just want to note that the clerk has circulated a new table as Appendix B, and I'm wondering whether the motion, as a result, should read for the second sentence that the city solicitor be instructed to bring forward the necessary bylaw to provide property tax exemption listed in Appendix A, B is amended, and C to the April 24, 2017 council meeting.
Ms. Howard, you want to talk about that? You're looking, you're ready to jump out of your chair there. It's okay, you can stand up. It's
the
all
city
it's all
manager we were just conferring, so could you just repeat the question? I apologize.
Councillor Hawkins?
I note that the city clerk, by memo on our desk today, has asked us to replace the existing table in CM 17.3, 2017 annual property exemption, page 4 of Appendix B with the attached, and attached is another table. I'm just asking really whether it's necessary to amend the motion, therefore, to read listed in Appendix A, B is amended, and C.
Through you, Your Worship, that's actually the other report.
That's on the property tax exemption.
That's right.
It's report number 3, I believe?
Yes.
Okay.
It's the next report.
No problem.
I have nothing further to add. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'll call the question on the report. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now we go to report City Manager's 17-3. This is the annual property tax exemptions. A mover for that, please. Councillor Hawkins.
Amendment.
With the amendment, okay. I'll take that as a friendly amendment because it really is simply a clarification. A seconder for that report, please. Councillor Young. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move, seconded by Councillor Young, that City Council recess until 5:30 p.m. on Tuesday, April 18th, at which time the remainder of this evening's agenda will be considered.
Any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. So just before we move adjournment, I want to explain what we've just done. We have listened to delegations quite closely, and lots of good points made throughout the evening. We will not be looking at the 2017 operating budget tonight. We are going to consider what was said by delegations and work forward to next Tuesday meeting. That's when our council meeting will be set to deal with the 2017 amended budget for 2017. So we're all clear on that? Councillor Flanagan moves adjournment. Seconder? Councillor Bresciani. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you.